Hello dear viewers, thank you for choosing the Manhwa compilation channel. Please leave feedback in the comments after watching. Enjoy watching. Many years ago, a small village held an annual food festival. Every year more and more people took part in it. With their delicious dishes, they wanted to appease the dragon for whom they were preparing it all. This year the banquet turned out to be much brighter than in previous years. It turns out that this year was wonderful. Every family in the village wants to stand out to receive the dragon's blessing. People say that the dragon deity in their village is so strong that people from other villages began to come to pray to the creature. Festival participants said among themselves that the king was so generous that he sacrificed many pig heads. Of course, this was done thanks to the dragon's precious grace, as many farmers gave birth to about a dozen piglets. Suddenly, a flatbread fell from the table. This greatly frightened the men standing nearby. They understood that there was no way this could happen. The pigs near which the bread lay were dead. They could not dump the food. The fat man felt that something was wrong. Raising their heads up, the villagers saw a flock of birds flying from the mountain. The second man who gave birth to pigs was horrified by what he saw. Particles of the mountain fell from the sky. The earth trembled and parted underfoot. People were in panic. It was an earthquake. Everyone ran in different directions and saved themselves as best they could. The force with which the earth diverged was enormous. All the stones flew down. In the dust that appeared from the earthquake, there was the outline of a man's body. A girl with eyes of an unusual color watched everything that happened. This girl was a dragon. She felt so hungry. The stranger appeared with a specific purpose. Having dropped to the ground, the girl looked at her feet. She saw the food that was lying on the floor, and thought to herself that if this is all there is, then it won't be enough. The goddess picked up the cake and tasted it. She didn't like the taste of the flatbread. She really needed to find someone. The stranger's goal was to find the dragon's cook. The girl didn't care whether he came to her in person or she killed him. In our world, a young guy woke up from a terrible dream. He dreamed that they were looking for him as the dragon's cook. Sitting on the bed, he recovered from the dream for a long time. The region of Sichuan was known as a paradise. It gained such fame not only due to the marvelous types of abundance in products, but also because this place was a unique treasury for Chinese gastronomy. At the restaurant, the chef was asked at what stage of readiness the fried pieces of chicken with red pepper were for the third table and the autumn flower salad. Stir-fried red pepper chicken pieces are soft and fresh. This dish was very popular in Sichuan cuisine, and the autumn flower salad was a secret recipe of the Mo family, and was famous for its exquisite shape and authentic crunch. The chef thanked the cook Zhang Shibo for his work, and the waitress was asked to bring these dishes. She must first show how the strava is prepared to the restaurant owner. At this time, the young master was sitting and playing a game on his mobile phone in the kitchen. The game was hard for the guy. He lost again. A worker approached the owner of the establishment with a request that he check the prepared dishes for the third table, as she had to do all the time before taking it out. But the young man was not distracted from the telephone game. He hoped that next time he would succeed. At that same second, the restaurant owner remembered that he needed to double-check the food. The waitress, looking at the owner, thought that things were bad. Returning to reality, the guy asked to bring the autumn flower salad. He wanted to look at the dish. The cooks were again worried that something would happen again this time. After looking at the presentation, the guy asked who made this salad. The man who prepared it answered and asked if he had any questions for him. The restaurant owner continued that the crushed radish should be cut easily and quickly. When placed on a plate, it will resemble an autumn chrysanthemum, hence the name of the dish. There were certain three conditions that made this salad elegant: subtlety, transparency, and softness. The restaurant owner pointed out to Zhang Shibo that the radish he cut was thick and uneven. The dish that had just been brought to him for inspection could not be called a flower petal. The restaurateur was angry. He ordered this dish to be repeated. The next day, the cook had to practice using a knife for about an hour. The cook was shocked by what he heard. Zhang Shibo swore and could not believe that he was ordered to do this. The cook shouted that the thick and uneven radish was nonsense. He accused the restaurateur of only doing what he commands. The man demanded that he show him his skills. The angry cook continued so that he would not think that if he is a beginner, he does not understand anything. He also accused the young man at that time of being terribly crooked. The other chefs restrained their colleague. They asked him not to say that. The main character was called a loser. Mo Ting could not forgive him for this. The cook's hat flew to the floor. Zhang Shibo decided to leave. Finally, he said that he thought working in an establishment that has 100 years of fame would be great. But then it turned out that he had to let the boy tell him how to cook. That was enough for the accused cook. The owner tried to stop the worker and told him that he was right that the one in front was a loser. But his family always strives for excellence in cooking. The guy continued that as a cook, he does not respect his own food and is inappropriate to the opinions of other people. Zhang Shibo is not qualified to be a chef. The offended employee shouted that he did not deserve it just because of the words of some loser and laughed, but he did not expect that another person was watching their conversation. An unexpected guest, who turned to him, said that if he uttered these words, they would have a different meaning for Zhang Shibo. Mr. Mo appeared in the restaurant. The protagonist's grandfather, Mo Hong, is the current head of Mo's home cooking restaurant and the president of the Sichuan Cuisine Association. The old man heard their argument and asked permission to say something. All the cooks began to whisper that if he decided to speak, it would be bad for Mr. Zhang. Grandfather said that maybe he was right. The young master is a little picky, but that's not the main problem. Mo's reputation is built on excellence, doing what no one else can do, namely culinary excellence. The president of the association also asked the chef how good he is at cooking, and how he pays attention to every knife and every spatula that Zhang Shibo uses. The employee did not know how to answer this question. The old man continued and asked the cook to do himself a favor and stop trying to be part of the great. Zhang Shibo knelt down and asked Mr. Mo Hong to apologize. The employee realized that he was wrong in this situation. After what happened on the terrace, the grandfather sat with his grandson and said that he understood how difficult it had been for the child lately. The old man asked the main character to take care of himself. Mo Ting asked what his grandfather was talking about. He is also a representative of the 28th generation of Seven Mo. To which the old man replied that his talents and understanding of culinary art were worthy of this title. The guy continued to tell his grandfather that if it weren't for his problems with his hands, because of this, he is not at all hopeless. Getting up from the table, the grandson decided to show his grandfather what he was capable of. With his foot, he lifted a kettle of water from the table, and I was able to throw this dish high up. The teapot flew high above the table. The guy could control the force with which he threw the kettle thanks to his legs. Grandfather was greatly amazed by what his grandson did. The old man began to cry because he understood how persistent and trying this child was. Mo Ting looked at his grandfather and said that everything is fine. He was proud of himself. The cook ran up to them, shouting that he was afraid that not everything was fine, since someone had formed a crowd outside the restaurant. The guy was unable to control the kettle because of what he heard, and it broke and water spilled on the floor. The grandson asked if he understood correctly what the cook said, that someone wanted to make a fuss. In front of the restaurant, there was a crowd of people who were indignant. People shouted that this was all outrageous. They were wondering what these people were doing, because the Mo family was considered pious, and they never had conflicts. Someone from the crowd asked to call 110 since everyone watching this mockery was simply wondering what kind of farce was going on. Even the sign was broken. This is already too cruel. Two men stood and looked at the restaurant. The young guy asked if they had come to the right place. The guy continued that this old rotten diner is a disappointment, to which the older man replied that 100 years had already passed. The man in the suit continued that it was time to pay a huge price for what happened then. Mo Ting ran out of the restaurant and wanted to find out who created such a mess. Seeing a couple of men in front of him, he stopped and asked if they had anything to do with all this. The strangers realized that the heir of the Mo family was standing in front of them. The owner of the restaurant saw that the lawless people were standing right on the sign. Because they stood on the nameplate, the guy was ready to do something to them. The young man continued to stand on their restaurant sign without moving. The eyes of the owner of the restaurant, the heir of the Seven Mo's, filled with anger. The main character rushed screaming and wishing death towards his opponent. The stranger also prepared to take the attacker's blow. An unexpected guest ran to meet the main character. The restaurateur told him not to think that the Mo family would be so easily intimidated, and none of them would get away unpunished today. The old man leaving the restaurant thought that in front of them stood people who exuded impressive aristocracy. Mo Hong said that their family always believed that they were helping others, but strangers broke their sign and trampled on it. The crowd began to say that those who came deserved death, and it was not permissible to dishonor good people like that. Those watching from the crowd asked Brother Ting to kill this old man. The man in the suit began to laugh when he heard the words that this family is good people. His laughter became hysterical. Having calmed down, he turned to Mr. Mo Hong to ask if he remembered the Huang family in the south of the city. Even though it was 100 years ago, they have the right to trample on this sign. From what he heard, the old man understood who he was talking about. His eyes enlarged and reddened capillaries became visible. Standing in front of him was the Huang family from the south of the city. Mo Ting said that he doesn't care who they are, but if they don't have a better explanation, he won't listen to them. Grandfather, in a rage, ordered him to shut up. Mo Hong bowed to the Huang family representatives and said that they were respected guests of the Mo family. Next, they will be polite to them. The main character did not understand why grandfather changed his face so much and said these words. To the old man's words, the stranger replied that this child does not know the history of their families, which is why he behaves this way. 100 years ago in the city, there were two leading kitchens for their outstanding abilities. They were awarded royal gold. The man asked the young man whether he understood what the man said. The protagonist's surprise knew no bounds. Our character's family lived north of the city, and the stranger's ancestors, the Huang family in the south of the city. Their families were friends, if not for those empty and pompous titles. Through the gold that they were promised, a fratricidal war began. In the end, the Mo family won, and the Huang family left the country with a humiliating defeat. During all these 100 years, the vanquished did not return to their homeland. Today, the representative of the Huang family has come to fulfill his promise to his ancestors to challenge the Mo family and regain glory. What the Huang family did today carries a more serious meaning than it seems at first glance. Conversations began between the representatives of the greatest families watching. That there was nothing wrong with this. How difficult it was for them. And it was not started by them. Mo Ting wondered how this could happen. Grandfather put his hand on his grandson's shoulder. This action surprised the guy very much. People whispered. It seemed to them that the old man had aged even more and looked bad. The girls who watched such a scene thought it was nonsense, because both of these families suffered. This family was in trouble. Old Man Mo is the president of the Sichuan Cuisine Association. The main character believed that he who remembers the past is out of sight, as they say. The eyes of representatives of both families met. They understood each other without words. Old Man Mo bowed to the guests and admitted that he was Mo Hong, the representative of the 27th generation of the Mo family, greeting them as old friends of his family. The main character's clan will make concessions. Our character did not understand and was too surprised by the words of his grandfather. The chairman of the association continued that he accepted the challenge of the Huang family. In keeping with their promises to their ancestors, they will settle their feud in a culinary duel. This will be done at a time when the Huang family is ready. The guest said that he was impressed by his nobility. If we talk about time, they are ready and want to do it right now. The stranger's hand reached out to the red cloth, which was hiding something not far from him. He quickly removed the cloth from the table. There were already ingredients for cooking on it. They are ready to fight in the culinary arts right now. Everything was prepared on the table, from ingredients to cutlery. The Mo family was not prepared for what they saw. Observers said that the Huang family looked like they had already won. This family had prepared very well. But still, among outsiders they beat and disagreed, because the Mo family has been cooking for so long, and the old man was an excellent cook. Mo Hong said that he saw that the guests were well prepared and began to roll up his sleeves. He wanted to take the fight. Mo Ting, seeing what his grandfather was doing, thought about the state of his body now. The old man understood his grandson's thoughts and said that everything was fine. He still had the strength to cook. The guest hastened to tell the chairman not to rush. First, you need to agree on the terms and punishment for the losers. If the Mo family loses, then not only will they give up their ancestral home, they will lose the title of winners in that conflict. They will give up the title of the best in the world. But most importantly, I will kneel before them. Mo Ting laughed because every year in the family, 8 out of 10 cooks of his grandfather fail. The stranger can lose as many times as he wants. Mo Hong accepted all the conditions. The guest expected such an answer. Only this time, the representative of the Huang family in the cooking competition will not be the eldest. His son Huang Tian will cook. This guy is in charge of the kitchen in the Huang family. After Tian returned to his homeland, he received the highest qualification as a chef. Therefore, the eldest representative of the Huang family wanted the heirs to compete in a culinary duel. Mr. Mo did not like what he heard. Mo Ting didn't expect this either. The main character clenched his fists tightly. He could not cook. Even as a child, doctors diagnosed Mo Ting with a rare case of skeletal pathology in the forearm. Compared to normal people, he was unable to perform fine movements and has less strength. The disease could not be treated, and this is the worst thing that could happen to him, because he is the only heir to the family's culinary art. Unfortunately, modern medicine is not able to cope with the diagnosis. Culinary art is impossible for this child. Huang Tian turned to Mo Ting and said that although he does not know how to fight, he is a very good cook. He picked up a knife and tossed an apple. He decided to show his skills. This guy has never lost to anyone. He skillfully cut the fruit that the unexpected guest threw up with a knife. All his life, he tried to be the best among the best. Among the crowd, voices were heard about how the apple instantly turned into a flower, and from the outside, it was very beautiful. Old Man Mo saw that this child possessed the Huang family's greatest skill, a blade, at such a young age. Mo Ting understood that he was not his rival. For the main character, it was a shame when the name of his family was trampled on. No one had ever seen the culinary abilities of the young heir before, and it seemed a shame. Huang Tian said that the Mo family doesn't even have the courage to fight. Gritting his teeth, the main character wanted to say something, but his grandfather beat him to it. The old man came forward in front of his grandson. The elder folded his hands and said that they were surrendering. Mo Ting knew why his grandfather was doing this, but he also knew and understood that he needed to do it. The townspeople began to say that this was the end of the century-old words of the Mo family. They surrendered without a fight. It is a huge shame to kneel publicly. The Huang family did not expect this turn of events. Their opponents surrendered without a fight. They weren't even given the opportunity to fight and prove that they had become stronger and better than the Mo family. The chairman admitted defeat and apologized to them, as agreed. Mo Ting hurried to his grandfather and said that there was no need to do this. Huang Ting already lit up with joy. This guy didn't dare to have a culinary duel. It turns out he has no conscience. Grandfather reminded his grandson that they must keep their promises. The old man bowed his head as if it wasn't difficult for him. His legs were trembling and he struggled with the fact that he would need to kneel. The crowd of mouthless people was shocked that the family of the best chefs would now kneel before someone. Shouts were heard from the crowd that the elder had lost. They also said that this old man did not have a worthy heir. The main character, clenching his fists, said that he is a representative of the 28th generation of the Mo family. The guy did not understand that he was not so skilled in this skill. In front of everyone, Mo Ting knelt down so that his grandfather would not do this. He understood that with his illness, he would bring even greater shame to his family. What they saw shocked the guests. They didn't expect it to go like this. Grandfather did not expect that his grandson would get ahead of him, kneeling down. Despite how difficult it was for Mo Ting to admit it, he said that he would admit defeat on his knees. Also, the main character swore that he himself would erase the shame of the Mo family. Rising from his knees, he approached the heir of another family and looked him straight in the eye. Mo Ting promised that the time would come when it would be necessary, and he would return glory to the Mo family and shame on the Huang family. Someone was watching the city. An unknown girl, standing on the highest building, saw and witnessed everything that was happening. A smile was shining on her face. She heard the smell of the dragon cook. A stranger jumped from a height to celebrate and flew. Grandfather and grandson were sitting at the dining table. Although the old man had not cooked for a long time, Mo Hong still did an excellent job. The elder asked the young man to eat it while it was still hot. After today, he may not try Grandpa's food again. The main character's eyes darkened. He could not do anything. He felt unnecessary after today. Hitting the table with his hand, he wanted to somehow throw out his anger. The main character was angry with himself and asked his grandfather. They couldn't just accept defeat and these upstarts of the Huang family. The young man could not believe that his grandfather had just been kicked out of the world of cooking. Despite what happened during the day, the old man was calm, although depressed. Mo Hong put down his chopsticks and calmly looked at his grandson with a smile. He turned to the child with the words that he had already lived his whole life without any regrets. After all, he is incredibly happy that he is already over 80, and he can still cook a delicious dish. The old man was happy, so they can and should put up with this. Mo Ting began to say that it was his fault for the loss. If not for his illness, then everything would have been different. Grandfather immediately began to calm him down. He could not blame the child for what happened. Mo Hong continued that he forced someone to find information about that boy. Even if grandfather were not old and weak, he would not be able to win. It was a rule that when people of their kind retire, they must pass on one thing to the next generation. Now it belonged to Mo Ting. It was a beautiful wooden box. The main character hurried to open the box. What was lying there surprised him very much. The young man had never seen such a pendant before. Mo Hong began to say that this was a family heirloom. They say that their ancestor was a farmer and became a famous culinary master just a few years after he got this thing. Grandfather continued that after their ancestor became the royal chef, their family received their nameplate. According to legend and the words of our ancestors, this thing had magical powers. But while it was passed down from generation to generation, there was no evidence of this. Well, he said that the rules say that when the previous generation passes into a quiet life, this heirloom is passed on to the next generation. So the grandson needs to keep it. Now this is an heirloom of the Mo family and its owner was Mo Ting. The guy had a lot of incomprehensible thoughts in his head. He looked at this little thing and did not understand much. The most important thing that bothered him was that he had no right to own it. The main character considered her hands useless for his diagnosis. Out of anger, the main character slammed his hand on the table in which he held the talisman. From the impact and sharpness of the thing, my hand was cut, and drops of blood scattered across the table. Throwing the talisman on the table, the main character left the dining room in which he and his grandfather had dinner. The grandson slammed the door behind him. Grandfather wanted to say something but didn't have time. Mo Hong looked at the thing he wanted to give to his grandson and sighed. The heirloom was lying on the table where Mo Ting threw it. There were drops of the main character's blood on the artifact. Suddenly, the heirloom began to glow. On the city street, you could hear people shouting in one of the restaurants and asking to catch the thief. The cooks were chasing someone with knives and shouting to grab the girl and not let her run away. This was the character who was sitting on the roof of a tall house, the girl who was looking for the dragon cook. Having stopped, the cooks looked around, but she was nowhere to be found. The dragon had disappeared somewhere. She was too fast for people. The kitchen workers said among themselves what a disgrace was happening in broad daylight. This girl robbed a dozen tables and even took away the head of a pig. There was a dragon monument in the city which was worshipped by many residents. On the roof of the palace where the memorial was located, this robber arrived. She took a lot of stolen food with her. The girl greedily ate the pig's head. When having stuffed the last piece into her mouth and worried, the dragon girl was still very disappointed. The food she ate was still impossible to eat. The food was prepared and tasteless. The girl turned to the monument near which she was sitting and began to talk to him. She didn't like that there were so many people here. She asked her fourth brother, and complained to him that if she didn't find a dragon cook, then these bastards might just beat her to death. The girl reached out to the sculpture and asked that they not just stand there. She needed their help. She asked her relatives to help look for the dragon cook. Suddenly the girl felt something. The dragon smelled it. The dangerous blade was activated. The dragon cook had returned. Now she was sure that he was on the ground. Thanking the brothers, the girl jumped off the roof and went for the artifact. That same evening in Mo Ting's house, after a bad day, the guy thought that the grandfather was turning to the main character to accept the knife, because it was their family's legacy, a sign of hope. The young man must accept this thing. The main character was the only heir to the Mo family. He lay in his bed, thinking about what happened. Suddenly, the guy heard a strong wind, which was able to open the window. The character instantly got out of bed and thought about what it could be. The thought came to him, this must be a robber. Anyone might want to covet their home. The main character's hand reached out to the baseball bat that stood near his bed. In the kitchen of the Mo family's house, a dragon girl was sitting at the dining table. She devoured food with great greed. To herself, the girl noted out loud that this was excellent. It's clear that this generation of dragon cooks well. Having had a good dinner, she yawned. After such a day, the girl definitely needed to sleep. The heroine decided to sleep and take the cook with her tomorrow. She quickly fell asleep on the sofa in the dining room. The main character entered the room where the girl was sleeping. Seeing a man who had fallen asleep, the young man thought how disrespectful it was. Now the thief also decided to sleep. Our character wanted to punish the stranger. Coming closer to the sofa, the main character swung at the thief. With great force, he hit the girl. The stranger woke up from a strong blow and screamed. Mo Ting saw that there was a girl in front of him. The grandfather woke up from the screams and went as quickly as possible to the room where everything happened. The old man turned on the light. And when the lighting appeared in the dining room, he saw his grandson standing, and a girl was lying on the floor next to him and screaming in pain. From the blow which the main character struck with a bat, the girl fell to the floor and woke up. She held her head where she had been hit and looked at her offender. Mo Ting immediately asked for forgiveness. The dragon's eyes lit up with anger because some little man dared to hit her. Now let him begin to say goodbye to his life. The goddess of another world cannot forgive this. The girl extended her hand, and with the human hand began to become the real one she has in the world from which she came. When Mo Ting saw what happened to her hand, the guy was horrified. He realized that the one in front was not just a person. When the stranger pulled to strangle the offender, her attention was attracted by the pendant that hung on the guy's neck. The girl's eyes became even more yellow, and her pupils ceased to be human. The main character saw how the stranger's eyes changed. This horrified him. Seeing the knife on her neck, the girl immediately took on a completely human form, and immediately took the artifact in her hand, from which she could not take her eyes off. The goddess immediately began to sniff the main character. Delighted that this was exactly the person she was looking for, the dragon quickly pulled him towards her. Without explaining anything, the thief extended her hand. From the movement of the fingers, a fiery beam immediately appeared. Taking the main character by the hand, she winked at him and said that he was coming with her. The girl pulled Mo Ting with her with great strength. This couple immediately disappeared into a fiery funnel. Grandfather watched everything that was happening in horror. He didn't understand who it was or what had just happened. The old man extended his hand to the funnel and shouted, "Mo Ting!" He was calling his grandson. Suddenly a girl's hand appeared from the funnel. Grandfather thought that she was reaching out to him to pick him up, but the stranger was only interested in the food on the table. Having taken the leftover food, she said, "Don't let your work go to waste." She also needs to take this with her. After she took the hand with the plate on which there was food from the human world, the funnel began to close. The head of the Mo family stood in confusion. Grandfather looked at the floor and saw that only a bat remained on the floor, with which his grandson ran into the dining room at the sound. Mo Hong, he was thinking about what just happened, who it was. Having found herself in a temporary funnel that transferred the main character to another world, the girl let him go. The guy didn't understand where they were going. He couldn't give an explanation for what was happening. The bright sun shone into the character's eyes almost the entire time he was falling. Most of the way he had to cover his eyes with his hands in order to somehow protect himself from the wind and bright sun that surrounded him. Having found himself in another world, the main character thought that this was all impossible, that what happened to him there was no explanation. He needed to find out what this girl had gotten him into. The place where they ended up was completely different from the city in which he lived. Looking around, our character thought about what kind of place this was. Here the houses were on rocks flying in the clouds, as if he had entered the world of a fairy tale. Flying head down, the main character thought that things were bad. Falling down, Mo Ting could only scream. The guy shouted that he was going to die. Thoughts flashed through his head that a dead child was a real grief to the family, and all because of some thief. After all, it was she who brought him here to kill him. If he dies today, his soul will not allow her to live in peace. The dragon girl listened to all this and smiled at what was said. Flying up to him with a chicken leg in her hand, the stranger said that even if he became a ghost, he would not do anything to her. She's not afraid of ghosts. Mo Ting asked who she was and asked to let him go. The goddess calmly ate a chicken leg. Chewing food in her mouth, she said that she was his ancestor. Mo Ting laughed because the one in front was a girl who looked almost like a baby. Her words greatly offended the guy. The young man asked to let such a respected person like him go. The girl didn't like the main character's words. She said what nonsense he was talking about and hit him in the face with a chicken leg that she had not yet finished eating. Having calmed down a little, the dragon said that it would not be very easy to find him, so they needed to return before the gluttons got him. The main character said that he would die, and even young. He didn't like what he heard very much. The girl grabbed Mo Ting by the bomber jacket and flew with him. The young man screamed that he could not breathe. The main character asked if it was possible to somehow treat him easier. He will die now, or rather she will strangle him. The heir of the Mo family wanted the stranger to let him go. Flying upward, the young man saw a terrible creature that opened its mouth right in front of them. The girl said that she would let him go a little later, when the couple arrived at the place. Out of fear and seeing the monster, the main character himself grabbed the stranger and, without realizing it, pressed his face into the girl's chest. The thief didn't like it. She screamed for him to take his hands away from her. But if the character took his hands away and let her go, he would fly to feed those monsters. And he is not a fool. A fight broke out between them in the sky. The main character asked for forgiveness and promised that he would let her go. They flew to a place that belonged to a girl. What he saw surprised Mo Ting very much. They stood in front of Teote's house. The guy knew what this palace meant. Our character now understands that this child standing next to him is the middle child of the dragon. In addition, she also turned out to be a huge glutton. The way the main character called the princess glutton, the girl didn't like it. She immediately hit him on the forehead. The guy almost lost his balance from the blow, but was able to stay on his feet and not fall. The girl stood next to him and explained that she was not a glutton, but the goddess of food. The blow to the forehead received from a stranger gave the young man a severe headache. He could not believe that she was really who she said she was. To him, it seemed crazy. To show that she really is a goddess, the young lady took on her real appearance. In front of the main character was the revered dragon breadwinner. Raising her hand upward, she gave the order that the gates of the Toyota house would immediately tremble. After these words, the girl shouted, "Open up." Having taken on her real appearance, the goddess grew dragon horns, and the clothes she was wearing before completely changed. The young lady now did not look like a teenage girl. A real goddess stood in front of the main character. The young man could not believe that a real breadwinner dragon was standing in front of him. Noticing the look, Motina goddess smiled and said that the guy looked stupid. She is truly the 9th princess of the dragon family. Her duties are to be in charge of the delicacies of the 3 worlds, and also owns the Toyota Palace. The young lady was the owner of the place where they were now. Even though she is the 9th princess of the dragon family, he must call her by the name Juzi. And the main character thought that the world in which he found himself was inhabited by dragons and fairies, and he was very unlucky with this. The princess brought out a contract in front of him, which she demanded to sign. But Mo Ting didn't really want to sign the document. He needed to know what was really going on. This was not beneficial for the dragon. She hit the young guy in the face with the contract, and once again threateningly ordered him to sign. The main character asked her to wait. He needed to figure out what was ultimately going on here. The young man was waiting for an explanation from the girl. The princess explained that since she is the goddess of food and is in charge of the space of Linglang and the house of Tyote, she is also responsible for delicious food among the beings of the 3 worlds. The dragon's cook is the best cook on Earth. The feeding dragon slept on Earth for several years, but the dragon's last cook died, and these little people continued to cook her bad food that the heavenly inhabitants could not eat. Therefore, she is now giving him a rare chance that can change his whole life. The young man was surprised that the gods should also eat, since the head of the divine dining room was now standing in front. The dragon didn't like what the guy called her. The goddess again reached out to hit him, saying that the gods are not as simple as he thinks. They won't just eat food that doesn't taste good, and it has a special purpose. The princess explained that the deities, of course, want to enjoy the best food, so being a dragon's cook is a revered job in heaven. The dragon continued that over the years, she had acquired many treasures through blackmail. Realizing that she had stirred up too much, Juzi threatened him that he had not heard how she got the treasure. In any case, since the blade declared itself, it means Mo Ting was a good cook, and she agrees with this, so he must sign the contract now. It dawned on the main character why she brought him here. The food that the girl ate was prepared by his grandfather. Now the young man must explain everything to this crazy woman. The guy wanted to explain himself but didn't have time. The princess grabbed his hand and told him to be a man because he was acting like a wimp. By force, the goddess put Mo Ting's fingerprint on the contract and added that she would have a hard time if she delayed with this. Now the agreement between them was signed. As soon as he realized what had happened, he immediately shouted that the dish that the dragon ate in his house was not prepared by him. But it was already too late. The girl brought the contract to the heavens. It lit up. It was like a message to the other gods that the contract had been signed. As soon as Juzi showed the contract was signed, a beam from the contract immediately appeared, and a white fog began to rise and engulf the area where they were. The fog spread to the entire Tayot palace. The princess waited with interest to see what would happen to her house. The main character simply looked at what was happening in surprise. And before his eyes, Tayote's house changed its appearance. The palace began to burn. Soon small yellow pebbles were flying in the sky. These were the remains of the courtyard that had just been in front of them. The whole house disappeared right before their eyes. There was no explanation for the protagonist's surprise. The guys couldn't believe their eyes that the house simply dissolved and disappeared. Jiuzi screamed that this damn boy made a house that just disappeared before their eyes. All the remains of the palace were flying in the air. Mo Ting didn't know how it all happened. He had no explanation for this. The ninth princess said that when a dragon cook appears, Tayote's house changes depending on the characteristics and skill of the new cook. But there has never been such a bad restaurant. It was simply impossible. Juzi immediately ran up and took the main character by the loops. She needed to find out how good he was at cooking. The dragon threatened that he should not touch anything if he wanted to live. Mo Ting hastened to justify himself and said that he had already told her that the food that the girl ate in his house was not prepared by him, but by his grandfather. The goddess brought him here and forced him to sign a contract, but before that she didn't even listen to him. From what she heard, the dragon princess was breathing steam with anger. Suddenly the sky turned orange and black and a voice was heard that the job was done. The dragon cook had returned. The ninth princess realized that she would be finished. If they find out the truth, a funnel opened in the sky and flew. They heard many voices, one after another. One after another, phrases were heard that the dragon's cook had returned, and they would somehow definitely come to the dragon's ninth daughter and try his food. Another said that here the goddess of food had owed him a feast for many centuries and he would also arrive soon. The third said that the girl had finally found a cook. If he didn't like the food, the deity would have to resign from his post. The fourth said that he would arrive soon and he wanted to see a good table. The main characters were too scared by what they heard. The princess said that it was good that she promised the Lord that if something happened, she would kill him. Having heard about his possible imminent death, our character was too scared. Out of anger, Jiuzi turned to Mo Ting. She needed to find out what dishes he could cook. The young man said that he had never cooked anything before. The princess said that she would die with him. They will die together, not as lovers, but as culprits. A strong wind was heard in the sky. Some creature was in a hurry to the Tayot palace. A huge blue drop was purposefully heading straight towards our heroes. The creature flew up to them and spoke to the princess. The drop was glad that she returned after all. During the time she was absent, every day the guards of the eastern heavenly gates bothered him and said that they would come to the feast. He urgently needed to see the dragon cook she had found. The creature was interested in when he would return to his workplace and begin performing his direct duties. The boy looked at this creature without taking his eyes off. The goddess said that this is Po, and he is the spirit of the owner of the Tayot house. Now they will meet often. The spirit of the cooking house saw a young man in front of him and quickly walked towards him. Po immediately flew to find out if it was really the dragon cook in front of him. The main character said that if you believe the words of this cruel girl, then that's what he is. The spirit flew up to the main character and said that it's great. Finally, Tayote's house has been saved. In front of him is a cook who cooks very well. I looked at the face of the goddess and the guy. Po couldn't understand what was wrong with them. In a matter of seconds, it dawned on the spirit that the guy standing in front doesn't know how to cook. The heir of the Mo family said that he did not want to be a dragon chef. In the human world, he could not do anything since this stranger simply dragged him into this world without asking or finding out anything. Juzi began to say that he was wearing that dragon chef's knife, which she used as a guide, and the main character made excuses and asked again if the princess could have thought that it could have been some other knife, not exactly the one she was looking for. The girl continued that they really just replaced him, and that's what actually happened. The spirit of the Tyote house stopped their argument, saying that they now need to think better about what to do. The ninth princess of the family said that the only thing left for them is death if this guy doesn't know how to cook. Mo Ting turned to the goddess to look at his hands. With hands like his, you can't do anything sensible. The guy held out his hands so that his new comrades could look at them. Jiuzi entered the body of the young man with her gaze and looked. On the outstretched hands, the tendons and veins were not developed. One got the impression that in front of them was not a healthy guy, but a disabled person. Clenching his hands into fists and looking at the inhabitants of another world, the heir of the Mo family could hardly hold back his tears. The dragon, having learned about the diagnosis, began to reason that in this case, one heavenly pill would be enough. Although let him forget, first she will send him back to Earth, otherwise these idiots will tear him into pieces if they don't get a very tasty meal. Hearing the girl's words, the guy asked her to stop. Tin ran up to her and took her by the shoulder. He asked what she just said. The goddess began to remember what it was. Perhaps this is that she will send him back to the world of people, but this is not what the main character needed. The words were spoken a little earlier. Before them, she said that his tendons and veins were not working properly. The guy asked what was said after that. After Juzi spoke about a heavenly pill that would be enough for his recovery. The main character said that this is what he needs. The young man must find out the place where they are sold. The ninth princess of the dragon family realized that if he needed a pill, it turned out that he wanted to enlarge his arms. The girl understood that although it would be as easy as shelling pears for her to get this pill, he had already caused her so much trouble that she was not sure whether she should look for it for him. Anyway, the goddess decided that it was time for the guy to return to his world. The dragon quickly grabbed the main character by the shoulder. By force, she opened the funnel and wanted to burst it out of there. The main character asked to talk, but they needed to hurry. Mo Ting promised that he would help with a feast for the guards of the Eastern Heavenly Gates. The funnel continued to suck in the young man. Hearing the words of our character, the goddess of food decided to close the funnel. Turning to the young man, she asked if he really would help her do this. The main character confirmed his words just spoken. The ninth princess of the dragon clan, together with the spirit of the house, carried Mo Ting to the palace. Now the front was Tyote's new house. The estate that appeared after the contract between the cook dragon and the feeding dragon was signed was much worse than the previous one. Standing in front of the kitchen in spirit, my stomach began to growl at home. Mo Ting, looking at what the palace had become, said that this was also not bad. Po angrily said that it was all the guy's fault, since Tyote's house and the dragon's cook are one. As good as the dragon chef's food is, so is Tyote's house. The spirit screamed for the guy to look at what he had turned their brainchild into. This type of house was unacceptable. Juzi sternly warned the young man that if he failed, she would kick his ass. The heir of the Mo family said that he had never cooked in their world, but he had never had problems with traditional cuisine in the human world. The goddess did not really believe the young man's words since she saw his hands. The main character said that he knows many dishes to prepare that you don't need to use your hands. Po stepped forward to give the new dragon chef a tour. This made the guy laugh a little, since in front of them there was just a small stall and not a huge restaurant. Po continued that Tyote's house is a unique artifact in the three worlds. The treasures are right inside this kitchen furniture. For Mo Ting, the closet that the blue drop pointed to was the most ordinary. But still, the guy extended his hand to open the indicated locker. As soon as the young man opened the door, strong smoke poured out. The guy was ordered to open his eyes and not be afraid to look in front of him. After our character opened his eyes, what he saw shocked him greatly. The royal garden is home to all kinds of birds and animals from the three worlds. The main character said that this amazing garden is very huge. According to him, in comparison with the previous royal garden, it was 1,000 times larger than this one. Next, there was a field with 100,000 herbs. These plants grow in the very heavens. There is also a yin-yang space. If the cook cooks a dragon, then here he will be able to reproduce that dish an unlimited number of times. There are many vessels in this place intended for storage. The smell of it was extraordinary. The spirit of the house hastened to say that only the dragon cook can use all this. Mo Ting cannot count on their help. As soon as they try to put their efforts into the process, the food turns out tasteless. Po continued that if the protagonist is ready, then let him begin. The honor of the dragon cook depends on Mo Ting himself. After that, the locker slammed shut. Our character found himself in his small stall. Jiuzi said that Tyote's house is now officially his. Since the guy said that he could cook without hands, she eagerly wanted to see his boasting. Mentally, the main character already knew what dishes he would cook. The first thing he thought about was the chicken. Mo Ting said that he knows what to do to surprise all the taste buds of the guests. To begin with, he needed to catch a rooster. In this kingdom, animals were not the same as in the ordinary human world, and birds knew how to breathe fire. The main character chased after his most basic ingredients. Only a few seconds later, he began to run away from the rooster that needed to be caught. His comrades laughed at him, calling him a coward and a cook whose ingredients were being beaten. The angry and offended main character shouted that it was not a rooster, it was some kind of monster. The birds of this world were different from those that our main character was used to seeing. For the world of dragons, it was an ordinary fire rooster. Those who spoke further continued to laugh at their cook because they saw him as a coward and said that what a bad owner he was. He had the same ingredients. The 9th princess of the dragon family said that this is an ordinary fire chicken. The entire generation of dragon cooks with a knife in their hand could get their hands on any ingredient. Jiuzi even pointed out how embarrassing it would be for the previous generation to see him now. Mo Ting reminded that if he doesn't succeed, he will simply get hit on the head, but the girl will be in trouble. The goddess of food flared up because he began to threaten her. Only he can work here. No one from the deities has the right to help him. Our character said that of course he will cook, and she can help him kill the bird, which beats him as hard. Po tried to support the guy and said that it was not a problem. The dragon cook always had many servants to help with the ingredients. The main character really liked what he heard. This function of using the help of his comrades was very important to him at that moment. The dragon got angry and started shouting at her comrade that the spirit should not dare force her to help some cook. This is a huge shame. Mo Ting continued that this monster is already nearby. To which the goddess replied that this was impossible. She would under no circumstances help him. After a few seconds, realizing that the time before the guests arrived was getting shorter, the girl decided to help the boy. The princess restrained the chicken with her strength. The main character thanked the goddess for helping him. This was very important to him. Just the fact that the young man called her an assistant angered the dragon. The girl ordered him to shut up and quickly start cooking. The guy asked her to calm down and asked Po to mix all the spices for him. In turn, Jiuzi would help him with something else. She needed to dig up some dirt. From what I heard, the goddess of fertility's eye began to twitch. She thought they were just laughing at her, to which the main character decided that she probably just didn't hear. He needs the kind of dirt that children play with when they imagine themselves as chefs of cool restaurants. The 9th princess shouted that some cook there wanted to force her to dig. The girl viewed this as the fact that Mo Ting does not love his life, because after this, he could simply be shaken. The young man hastened to remind that his hands are not capable of doing such work, so he hopes for her help. Po quickly flew up to his friend and asked her to come to terms with it. This guy is their only hope to save Tayot's house. After some time, the dragon's cook asked the spirit of the house if all the ingredients were ready. The spirit brought everything that Mo Ting asked for. The cook had the best ingredients from 3 worlds. Chicken breast, excellent wine, seasonings, dirt, flowers, and fruits. Everything he needed. Po said that now everything really depends only on Mo Ting. They did and helped everything they could. The guy's attention was attracted by the goddess. She was all black with anger and her eyes sparkled as if she wanted to incinerate the main character. Our character, looking at her with great fear, asked if everything was okay with her, and asked her not to look at him like that. Jiuzi replied that he should not talk nonsense. She just wants to watch him cook. Looking at his workplace, Mo Ting said that then it was time to start. The guy started cooking. The first thing he did was pour the wine into the mud. Po was shocked because this wonderful drink was about 500 years old, and this guy just poured it away. Having kneaded the dirt as needed further, the cook began cutting up the main ingredient. Took spices and mushrooms in my hands. He stuffed everything inside the cock. The bird was not plucked of feathers, after which he simply sewed up the chicken neatly. Po and Jiuzi watched all the cooking processes with incomprehension. After the chicken was filled with stuffing, the guy poured the dirt on it, which he had kneaded a few minutes ago. His comrades shouted that what he was doing was simply disgusting. In appearance, it seemed that the boy was simply playing as in childhood and not cooking. Moten said that he could not use his hands, a knife, or even a spatula. Therefore, he has to look for another way to prepare food. He just needs to wait. If the guys can't help him, then at least just don't interfere. He worked hard and almost finished everything. The cook stood in front of a huge ball of clay. Everything was ready. There was only one thing left to do. Looking at all this, Jiuzi shouted that it didn't even look tasty. The girl doesn't want to deal with him anymore. Now she will definitely die. The spirit of the Tayot house decided to leave the kitchen and lied that he needed to go to the toilet, so he would leave them for a while. Mo Ting turned to Po and said that he, since the chef, could not do without his help and ordered him not to go anywhere. The spirit of the house tried his best to ask for time off to be released. Tin said that Po needs to warm up this ball very well, and then it will be possible to open Tayote's house. The main character hoped that the spirit would try and not let him down. Po did everything as he was asked. He directed the fire at the chicken sealed in the mud. The main character was very surprised by this process. He did not believe that this was really possible to do. Po tried hard. Everything he did from the outside seemed as if there was a fire. At the top was a dish that was being fired. This was what a cook needed. Mo Ting said that since they have many guests, he needs the spirit to tell him something. It was necessary to multiply the dish several times and make as many servings as there would be guests. The dragon's cook thought that he needed some money for this. Po replied that money was not needed for such a function. The spirit had a magic crystal which was left by the last dragon cook. Our character realized that he was somehow connected to the house and Tyote, immortals who want to eat and must pay in crystals. This is because money on human Earth, the crystal that the spirit had, was the key to activating the function of the restaurant. Po remarked that if he did something worthwhile, he would give it to the cook. It would be a waste of the crystal this time. The chef was angry that his assistant was talking too much. What hurt Mo Ting even more was that they didn't believe in him. Mo Ting took the crystal from the spirit of the house. The guy had to show the power of his skills and prove to everyone that he was worthwhile. Placing the crystal in the place belonging to the house of Tyote, the jewel began to shine. He used the crystal and multiplied it several times. Rays of fire spread throughout the kitchen. The rays were directed towards the dish, which continued to prepare all this time. The clay ball was placed in a fiery funnel of rays. The crystal showed its power. Many rays began to emerge from the clay ball. Raising his head up, the main character saw that all these rays at the top were creating explosions. What happened next after the explosions made a huge impression on the guy. Everything that was happening seemed incredible. Above them, there were many clay balls that were shrouded in fire. His hands also appeared there, working diligently on the dish. As it turned out, the Tyote house can not only reproduce the ingredients, but also repeat the cooking technique. These ghostly hands will copy the chef. This was very useful. Now it was necessary to do the very last thing for preparation. Mo Ting took the spices and poured them onto the mud ball. After doing this, he simply clapped his hands. In front of them was a baked ball of mud, inside of which was an unplucked chicken with stuffing. Seeing the result brought tears to Po's eyes. He wanted to cry. The spirit really started screaming that he knew it. There was no need to believe this boy. Burnt balls that lay in front of them. My friends didn't understand how it was even possible. Now it was all over. This is the end. In the future, the spirit hoped to see the goddess of food again someday. Suddenly, the sky lit up. Raising his head, Mo Ting was surprised. He saw this for the first time. The clouds parted and there were shadows on them. The spirit of the house shouted that they were already here. In the sky, the men said how hungry they were, and finally Tyote's house was open. They also asked Juzi if everything was ready to eat. The spirit quickly grabbed the main character and began to drag him somewhere. He asked Juzi to allow him to return the man to Earth, otherwise he would now be a dead man. Mo Ting didn't understand why she was so worried about him and what the blue drop was telling him now. Our character did not understand why the spirit of the house behaved this way. All you need for a reception is the best wine and good food. The young man asked that his dear guests come into the house. 4 gate guards descended from heaven to earth. Po shouted that this was already the end. Men have already come from heaven. One of the guards replied that they had not come a long way to taste the coal balls that lay in front of them. Looking at this, he thought it was some kind of joke. The spirit of the house began to make excuses that they had some difficulties. Well, the guests continued that they are responsible for guarding the 4 gates and maintaining order in the heavenly space. Then why can't the house of Tyote fulfill its main task? After all, they have been saying for decades that the dragon's cook has not yet appeared, and everyone endured and ate all sorts of concoctions. But now that the dragon's cook had returned to his place, the guards rushed to the place and were greeted in this way. If the kitchen workers do not satisfy him and his brothers right away, then they will have only one way to kill everyone, and the house will be completely demolished. Po began to ask the gentlemen not to be angry, because they could return tomorrow, and so give them a little more time for better preparation. Mo Ting approached them and asked the heavenly warriors to welcome him to Tyote's house. The spirit of the house looked at the main character and thought that he was an idiot. He told him to keep his head down. Our character told the spirit that since the guests came, he didn't let them in, and that's wrong. The guy came out to the distinguished guests. He was in such a hurry that he did not notice the stone that lay under his feet, and clinging to it, the young man fell right under the feet of the guards. The guests leaned towards the main character and asked who he was. Smiling in pain instead of screaming, Mo Ting said that he is a dragon cook. One of the guests was surprised how such a brat who stood in front of them could even bear such an honorary title. Rising to his feet, the guy shook off his ardor. He looked at the guards and asked whether young people should not have the status of a dragon's cook. To which I received the answer that among the 3 kingdoms, the heavenly one is the most important. Immortals make the most important decisions and are subject to everything and everyone except culinary art. Therefore, the dragon cook is chosen from the human kingdom, where cooking flourishes. Although the gods don't know how to cook, they don't understand how you can learn to make culinary masterpieces at the highest level without practicing for many years. The guy standing in front of them was too young. He simply couldn't be a dragon chef according to his age. One of the guards took out the sword that he had. This time the main character was too scared for his life. The guard approached the chef with great force, shouting that this lie should be punished. Seeing what was happening to Mo Ting, Juzi quickly hurried to his aid. The ninth princess tried to get to the guy as quickly as possible and protect him. She succeeded. She parried the attacker's blow with her strength. The guardian of heaven was defeated. Seeing how the goddess stood up for the cook and quickly ran up to them, they immediately spoke to her in a completely different tone. The dragon said that they should not dare to fight on her territory. The men fell to their knees and asked the respected Juzi not to be angry. They said that this boy says that he is the dragon's cook and thus deceives them. To which the ninth princess of the clan replied that she herself personally found him, and he really is the dragon's cook. If they want to argue with her on this, they can continue. Naturally, the guards did not want to argue and did not dare to speak to the deity like that. The guests suggested finding a compromise in all this. One of the guards suggested that the rest of his colleagues go as quickly as possible since they talk too much, and they might get hurt from the princess. Moting hurried to the men asking them to wait for you and not leave. Juzi was angry. She didn't know what he was trying to do, because she had just dispersed everyone. Does he really want them all killed? Moting did not stop. He had to prove to everyone that he could cook. The guy picked up the stick and threw it. The stick hit the mud ball. Damaging the dirt in the ball created a hole. Cracks appeared from this hole, and the dirt completely fell away. The spirit of Taote's house saw chicken feathers flying straight out of the mud. Moting was sure that they would like the food he prepared for them. A delicious chicken with a golden crust appeared before the guardians of heaven and the owners of the Taoto house. Looking at the food, the guards said how appetizing it looked and what aroma emanated from it. They didn't even think that there was a chicken in this mud. The goddess also smelled a pleasant smell, which made her want to quickly try this food. The main character said satisfactorily that this dish should be eaten while it is hot. Juzi was the first to try this crust. She pinched a small particle, put it in her mouth and began to chew. One of the guests asked her what this food tasted like. As soon as he tried a piece of fried chicken, Juzi's eyes began to show his love for this food. The taste was delicious. She hadn't eaten such a delicious meal for a long time. The guests could not stand it any longer and each attacked his portion. The taste of the prepared dish was perfect for everyone. The taste gradually revealed itself in a new way. The aroma from the food was so rich, and the taste itself was simply indescribable. Everyone was surprised that the young man who stood in front really turned out to be the dragon's cook. The ninth princess of the dragon family asked what kind of dish he had prepared. Moting said that this dish is called heavenly chicken. As a rule, chicken is steamed, baked, or fried. All this allows you to get an incredibly tasty dish. The guy continued that after all, the heavenly chicken is prepared without plucking and cutting, and is sealed in wet clay. All the spices and mushrooms in the belly of the chicken form an assortment of flavors. All this is slowly cooked in coals, but the aroma and broth are inside, remaining unnoticed by the unknowing person. Therefore, after opening the clay shell, the chicken feathers fall out on their own. The taste and smell are released, making the chicken more aromatic, rich and tender than other dishes. The main character said that this recipe was suggested to earthly minds by heaven. That is why the dish is called heavenly chicken. Our character was proud of himself that he was able to cook this and surprise everyone with his culinary skills. Suddenly, someone grabbed him. These were the guardians of heaven. They started tossing the guy up and praising how wonderful it was. For the inhabitants of heaven, it was excellent chicken. Everyone was wrong, as expected. There was now a real dragon chef in front of them. Jiuzi asked whether dear guests no longer doubted this boy, to which the clients replied that this was all nonsense. They wanted to congratulate them on the opening of the Taote house and the return of the dragon cook. They wholeheartedly congratulated the princess on the fact that she was able to find the cook for whom everyone in the heavenly world had been waiting for a long time. Po hastened to announce that Taote's house was open. The princess thought that Mo Ting really deserved as much praise as he was receiving now. The guy looked at the girl. He was proud of himself that he had not disappointed or let the goddess down. He also realized that she was pleased with him. Now the next step is to ask the princess of the clan for a heavenly pill. Mo Ting must heal his hands. When the sun set, all the guests were fed. The spirit of the Taote house called his comrades to see how they worked today. What they saw was amazing. Nobody expected such a result. The demon couldn't believe that they earned 10. Mo Ting asked what this thing was and what the number he saw meant. The princess hastened to explain that this is a crystal, and they use it to calculate the profits of the Taote house. 10,000 is the number of chickens sold today, and some visitors also leave ratings and comments. The main character was surprised that they could even leave comments. Poe said that you need to drag down on the screen to see them. The spirit of the house pressed the key that was mentioned above. The main character looked at the comment. He was surprised that visitors wrote about them. Almost everyone congratulated the Taote house on its opening. Customers really liked the heavenly chicken. Someone said that he lacked external grace and richness, but despite this, most reviews were only positive. All the heavenly inhabitants were waiting for the dragon cook to return. The guests also advised adding more dishes, and so that they do not forget about vegetarians, since they also exist, and also want to eat deliciously. Comments were left by all the legendary figures about whom stories are written. Mo Ting had only heard legends about these people before. The main character realized that this really was a huge pressure on him. Juzi decided to return the character to Earth. She slapped him and said that he was now a dragon's cook, not an ordinary person. The guy should show at least a little interest in this world. The goddess repeated that he will be a celebrity, but he needs to think carefully about the next dish. The main character hurried to ask if the princess had forgotten anything that she had promised him. The dragon did not understand what we were talking about. The girl really forgot something. The guy reminded me of the heavenly pill. He even thought that she had decided to deceive him. The goddess laughed that it was just a pill. She turned to Po and asked him to bring her his snack jar. The spirit of the house quickly darted behind what the can said. Having brought the jar, he immediately opened the lid. From there, Po pulled out a pill that was wrapped like candy. Po handed the pill to the main character. Mo Ting, looking at the drug, did not understand whether she could really cure him. The princess thought that the young man underestimated the house of Taote, and she ordered him to receive her. Now they will have another advantage. Po hastened to reassure the protagonist that the goddess of fertility is a well-known businesswoman in heaven. Only Mo Ting could not believe that this could somehow help him. In the human world, Mo Hong thought for a long time about what happened, sitting in his yard on the summer terrace, where just a day ago his grandson showed what he was capable of and how he could control the kettle. Grandfather was worried and thought only about the boy. The old man was haunted by the thought of where his baby Tin could be now. Mo Hong remembered how the stranger's eyes glowed, and she formed a funnel into which she took his grandson. The old man couldn't even do anything, didn't even have time to say goodbye. Suddenly he heard someone addressing him and calling him. Mo Hongwoo began to look around and look for where the familiar voice was coming from. Grandfather brought the cup to take a sip of tea. The elder of the clan sighed with great sadness. Mo Hong heard Mo Ting's voice again, like a grandson telling someone that grandfather was here. A fiery funnel formed in front of the old man, just like the one that swallowed up his grandson. Grandfather's eyes widened at what he saw. He did not think that he would be able to see his grandson from this funnel. In fact, Mo Ting showed up there. The old man quickly began to ask where he had been all this time and when he would return to him. The young man said that he could not answer his questions yet. But don't let him worry. Everything is fine in the place where he is now, and the guy really likes it there. His words, and the fact that he saw his grandson alive, reassured the grandfather. He asked Mo Ting to promise that he would not put himself in danger and that everything would be fine. Hearing the words of his only relative, how worried he was about him. Tears appeared in the eyes of the main character. Our character hurried to show grandfather something. The guy quickly took an apple out of his pocket. I threw him up very awkwardly, and with the other hand he pulled out a large knife. There was no limit to surprise at what grandfather saw. He wondered if Mo Ting could actually wield cutlery again, and he was cured in that world. The main character wanted to show his beloved grandfather all the dexterity of his hands. Mo Hong remembered how back when the main character was a baby, the doctor said that this child had neurological muscle problems in both arms. Relatives should not worry, as this will not affect his health. His fine motor skills will simply not develop. When our character's old man asked as a child what he wanted to do when he grew up, he received the answer that the child wanted to be a cook, like his grandfather. The guy spent a lot of time in the restaurant kitchen and very often played with knives, to which he constantly heard the old man's requests that he not play with sharp objects and be obedient. When wielding a knife and trying to cut something, repeat some movements after the senior cooks. Mo Ting did not succeed. He cut himself with a knife. The child screamed, called his grandfather for help, and cried, offended that the knife did not listen to him. It was after that ill-fated moment when Mo Ting cut himself that Mo Hong forbade him to never touch a knife again, so that the kid would not even think about learning to cook. Now the front is no longer a small child, but an adult young guy who wants to show that he has learned, contrary to what the doctor said, that he will not be able to develop fine motor skills. Our character felt like squeezing and holding cutlery. A force that he had not yet had was spreading along his hand along with the blood. He sincerely tried to believe that the pill that Juzi gave him had already begun to work. Swinging his knife, he looked for where the apple was. The main character wanted to show off his hand skills to refute what the doctors told him years ago. From the outside, it all seemed very exciting, as if there was a hero who had overcome his illness. Mo Ting wanted to prove to his grandfather that his hands were already listening to him. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed. He couldn't hit the apple with the knife as much as he wanted. An apple fell on the floor right in front of grandfather. The old man did not understand what had just happened. Mo Ting hurried to pick up the apple from the floor. The young man promised that he would train more, despite the fact that he didn't succeed now. The time that the main character could spend with his grandfather was coming to an end. From that world, he was already called to return to the world of deities. It was time to return to a new life. Having entered the funnel, which did not disappear anywhere, The grandfather watched his beloved grandson all this time without taking his eyes off. Everything that happened was strange and unknown to the old man. Our character said that he no longer has time and he must return. Despite the fact that he had little time, he was glad to see that his grandfather was alive and everything was fine with him. Finally, Mo-ting said that when he returns, he will prepare him the best dinner. Our character asked Mo-hong not to worry about him and wished him good luck. The funnel closed and Mo-ting disappeared. Grandfather looked stunned at the place where his only grandson had just gone. Mo-hong could no longer hold back his tears, he cried. It was impossible to understand whether they were tears of joy or tears of melancholy. Raising his head to the sky, the old man realized that now he really needed to stop worrying. When he saw his grandson alive and joyful, he understood that he was safe. The head of the Mo family continued to look at the sky, tears flowing down his cheeks. Grandfather sat for a long time in thoughts about where his grandson was and what really happened to him. But the most important thing for him was that he was alive, and the words with which he confirmed that he had found himself in a world where he really liked it. Mo-ting returned to the world of dragons, to an area where there were many beautiful plants and birds that he had never seen before. The nature that was in this world seemed amazing. Clear rivers, huge waterfalls, everything you needed to relax your soul and body. There were fruits in the clearing. It was clear from the scraps that someone had eaten very heavily. It was Juzi and Po who were resting. Having eaten, the goddess said how wonderful it is to feel full. The spirit of the Teot house supported the girl in her words. Po diligently chewed the remains of food that were in his mouth. The spirit looked at the water where the dragon cook was diligently training. Under the waterfall, Mo-ting trained his arms to make them more resilient and strong. The guy was lifting a heavy deck. No matter how difficult it was for him, he tried with all his might. The main character knew that he needed to improve to be the best dragon cook. Using all his strength, Mo-ting threw the deck out of the water and almost sank to the bottom of the river. Po saw the deck fall on the guy and shouted that the cook was drowning. A really huge sword fell on the main character, and he went under the water. But our character knew how to swim, so it was not difficult for him to adapt to the water. Since the water trained the muscles of the whole body well, it was just for his benefit. A few seconds later, Mo-ting emerged from the water. Po finally calmed down. The spirit was very worried that the dragon's cook would drown. The young man took the sword with him from the water. The training item was huge. The young man raised his equipment to the top. He wanted to show that he had increased strength. For several minutes, the main character held the sword above his head, no matter how difficult it was for him. Po turned to Juzi. He was worried that Mo-ting was acting like crazy. The spirit of the Teot house was worried that something had happened to the guy and he had somehow harmed himself. The young man's actions seemed abnormal. The 9th princess of the Dragon Clan said that he was fine, since she did everything to heal his hands. Now, if the guy had not started trying hard, he would have been an ordinary, ungrateful boy. Besides, no one is forcing him. He himself understands that while his hands are useless, they will remain so if he does not work hard. The goddess continued that the heavenly chicken is very tasty. But not all dishes can be prepared with his current abilities. And if they do not update the menu, then Teote's house is lost. The dragon noticed that she had really invested a lot of money in the cook. To give Mo-ting more time to train, the three of them moved to Tai Yi space. Here, time flows differently. It is very expensive. In this world, time hardly moves. A year in Taiya's space is equal to a minute in the outside world where they lived. But the 9th princess of the dragon family did not expect that it would cost her so much. Since the owner of this place said that the space can only be rented for a week, and if she needs a longer period, he pointed out that Taiyi really likes her treasures, and there is no other way she could agree with him. Juzi was very angry with the owner of these lands because she believed that it was the old pig who took all her jewelry that the girl had accumulated over all the years of her existence. Mo-ting came up behind her and put his hand on her shoulder. He asked the dragon not to be angry. The main character promised that he would not let her down. When his hands were in order, the restaurant would be even better than it was before. The girl replied that it would be better if he were right, or then let him blame himself. The spirit of the Teot house turned to the guy and asked that when he gets tired, he should definitely take a break. To which he received the answer that the young man was not tired, he just wanted to have a little snack. Mo-ting chose an apple for a snack. At first he looked at it for a while, as if thinking about what he should do with it now. Should you eat the apple right away, or maybe not? In 1 second, something happened to the main character, and the apple fell out of his hands. And the guy himself fell to the ground and passed out. He was very exhausted. Po noticed that in the end, the young man could not stand it, and would have to take a break after all. Juzi thought that this guy is not very talented, but he really tries very hard. The goddess noticed that now the dragon cook has absolutely no time to rest. The 9th princess of the Dragon Clan decided to use her powers to wake up the guy. Releasing yellow mist, she directed it at the sleeping Mo-ting. The power of the dragon enveloped the face and entire body of the main character. Within a few seconds, the princess's magic entered the main character. Our character opened his eyes and saw in front of him both Juzi and Po, who were looking at him. Immediately, Mo Ting jumped up and started shouting about how long he had been sleeping. The guy thought that he had been sleeping for more than 2 days. He began to make claims against the spirit of the Tayot house. Why didn't he wake him up? Because the young man asked to look after his condition. But Po turned all the arrows on the 9th princess of the dragon family and said that she did all this. He had nothing to do with it. The goddess immediately sent the main character to quickly train with his sword, and when he could already handle a kitchen knife. There wasn't much time left for training. The young man went to training with lightning speed. The main character quickly ran up to the crystal clear water. He quickly jumped into the water and continued training. Po asked Mo Ting to be careful. Well, the guy didn't listen to his friend's requests. He needed to develop his strength as quickly as possible. Therefore, he raised a sword in the water, on which lay a huge stone. The young man asked his comrades to be quieter, since everything was working out well for him. The spirit of the Tayot house was happy for the new dragon chef, and said that he was really developing quickly. The crystal clear water continued to beat against the rocks, which helped our character improve his technique. The main character shouted that this is not all. He wanted to show his comrades something. Mo Ting very quickly began to run across the water towards a stone that lay a few meters away from him. Approaching the stone at speed, he swung his sword with force. The stone scattered into small fragments in different directions. Po was happy that the dragon cook was doing well. He even took out a sign with the number 10 on it, which meant that the highest score in this competition went to Mo Ting. The main character considered himself a good man. He was proud of himself, and just like that, his strength cannot be compared with anyone else. The young man's joy knew no bounds. He was very proud that he felt the strength in his hands. Suddenly, a chicken bone flew at him. This quickly brought him down to the ground. Juzi threw this bone into him. She screamed that if he rejoices in such little things, then it's all in vain. He needs to train a lot, or the guy won't get any food. The comrades went to dinner. The spirit of the house said that Mo Ting might not have enough food, although the main character was dying of hunger at that time. The young man devoured all the food that Juzi had prepared. The girl turned out to be very capable of cooking. The 9th princess of the dragon clan said that they would not waste any more time, and demanded that Mo Ting give her his amulet. The young man, without any hesitation, removed the artifact that his grandfather gave him, thanks to which the dragon found him. Mo Ting laughed and said that Juzi was really going to give him a new sword for training. The girl noticed that in fact it was time for the knife. Chewing the food that was prepared for lunch, the young man thought about what his friend meant when he said these words. Juzi folded 2 fingers and used dragon magic. The 9th princess of the dragon clan spoke to the venerable dragon cook for the sharpest knife to appear. The knife that was on the main character's neck rose in the air and was surrounded by the girl's magic. What he saw in the main character took his breath away. Many rays and very beautiful figures appeared in the sky. Juzi and the spirit of the Tayot house looked fascinated at everything that was happening. The lighting that fell from the sky blinded the main character. Before his eyes, a small figure in the shape of a knife turned into a huge knife. Mo Ting asked if this was really the same knife that hung on his neck and how such a huge thing could be used by an ordinary person. Po said that the main character should not talk nonsense, because this is the sharpest knife, a great relic. It can be used directly. You just need to touch it. A dangerous knife appeared even before the formation of the 3 worlds. It is a symbol of the art of cooking itself. We can say that the one who masters it will become a master. Mo Ting now has to go and give it a shape. Just think carefully about how he wants it to be. Then this knife will take the desired shape for the cook. The spirit of the Tayot house wanted to warn the main character about something but did not have time. The young man was already running to the knife to change its shape. Po shouted that he was an ungrateful boy, and that he should quickly return since he had not finished yet. Mo Ting only thought that he needed to touch, urgently try to do it. Approaching the knife, he thought about what shape he needed. The fact that he represented the first form, the next baby, was not bad, but can only cut hands, also not suitable for cooking. The next knife, which is in the memories of the young man with which little Tin played when he was still a child, realized that he was not thinking about that. The guy turned all his thoughts to the knife and asked himself to calm down and think carefully about the cooking process. After thinking about it, the guy had an epiphany and remembered which knife would be best suited for his job. A shadow appeared before the eyes of the main character, working on the processes in the kitchen. The cook, who was in the young man's head, handled the knife well. The guy's thoughts were filled only with the fact that a knife was more suitable for all processes, and he understood which one he needed. Only this device can cut vegetables and any other ingredients. This was what the young man needed. Mo Ting remembered the words of his grandfather when he said that a good cook must skillfully use the knife in his hand. The knife his grandfather used was called Wenwu. It looked like an ordinary knife, but you could do anything with it. Of course, it is difficult to master this tool the first time, but an experienced chef can work wonders with this knife. Our character realized that he needed a Wenwu knife. He will be the perfect one for his job to become the best dragon chef. After the main character decides what his knife will look like, all the magic disappeared, and the knife also disappeared. The guy understood that something had to happen after this. He was very much looking forward to the result. After some time, a knife appeared in the main character's hand. It really worked out for him. Mo Ting shouted to his friends that he had finally done it. The guy's joy knew no bounds. He still didn't know what to do with him next, but he was still happy. Juzi smiled and said that the show will begin now, because Mo Ting will have to defend himself. Friends asked him to be careful. Hearing the requests of his comrades, the cook became worried. The guy became scared of what could await him. After a few seconds, the knife that was in the hands of the main character began to move, and it took enormous strength to hold it. After this, the knife began to glow with a bright flame, and within a few seconds, with enormous force, some huge force lifted up. The guy held onto the knife with all the strength he had so as not to fall. Immediately after that, an unknown force lifted the young man up. She let him go down, and he fell to the ground. Friends saw a mark on the ground. Presumably it was from the blow of the main character's body. Juzi raised her head and saw that he was upstairs. In the sky, somewhere high, the dragon cook shouted to his friends. For a long time, the young man holding the knife rose into the sky and then sank to the ground. Almost exhausted and surprised by what was happening, Mo Ting asked what was going on. Jiuzi and Po approached their friend and began to express how he could even touch the knife without listening to the spirit of the Tyote house. The knife stopped for a while, and the main characters took this opportunity to say that he almost died, and he needed to take a break. The young man was about to unclench his hands to let go of the knife. The 9th dragon princess screamed for the guy not to let go of the knife. Po connected so as soon as the hero lets go, he will lose the chance to control him. From what she heard, the main character clenched the knife even tighter than she had held before. The spirit of the house explained that as soon as he touched the knife, the so-called taming process began. Letting him go now would mean that the cook is giving up and all his efforts will be wasted. The goddess also joined in, telling that taming a knife tests the cook's will and patience. It will last 10 days, but after taming, Mo Ting will be able to control this knife perfectly. The main character asked why they didn't say this earlier. Now at least he has an incentive. In total, you need to hold out for 10 days. Jiuzi also said that the strength of the knife will change, so he needs to be careful. The guy hurried to calm her down and told her to relax. Everything would be fine. The knife again glowed with a bright light. The main character thought to himself that the test was starting again. The power of the knife was indeed difficult to control, but our character tried his best. After some time, Mo Ting lay on the lawn with a huge bump on his forehead. The knife continued to glow, and the guy still held it without letting go. The first day was very difficult for the main character, and he spent a lot of energy holding the knife in his hands. Friends watched everything that was happening and were very concerned about Mo Ting's condition. The main character did not give up. He said that it was not so easy. Therefore, there was even a time when he demanded that the knife attack him. The second day was, of course, a pitiful sight, but the guy continued to fight with the knife. The third day turned out to be no easier than the previous two. It seemed simply terrible to his friends as Mo Ting flew into the sky and hit the rocks, but with the last of his strength, he held on. In some situations that he then found himself in, it was like a shame for the dragon and the spirit of the House of Tyote. Despite all the difficulties, Mo Ting held in his hands the knife he had chosen. In appearance, it seemed that the main character was almost dying, but still was holding a knife in his hands. On an unknown day, Jiuzi asked what day it was. According to the spirit's calculations, it was the 10th day. The guy looked tortured to death. The 9th princess of the dragon family had an epiphany. If this is the 10th day, then a very important battle will take place today. The test of the inheritance was approaching. The girl was worried whether Tin would be able to withstand him. It became dark in the place where they were. Bright eyes appeared in front of Mo Ting. A voice ordered the dragon cook to wake up. Having opened his eyes, the main character could not understand who was addressing him, and he looked for him in front of him. The guy heard the laughter of an unknown creature that surrounded him on all sides. Compared to the dragon that appeared, Mo Ting was like some kind of small insect. Huge teeth and a dragon's tail appeared in front of the guy. It was all fiery black. The young man immediately woke up from what he saw. He didn't understand where he was. The only thing that bothered him now was who was with him. He caught himself thinking that this could be a real dragon. Immediately, Mo Ting felt that his hands were empty. He looked around and did not see a knife. The guy thought that his husband had disappeared, and he had failed the test. A face with fiery eyes appeared in front of the dragon cook. He spoke and asked if this was the boy who wanted to control him. The main character realized that in front of him was not just a dragon, but a knife that he had been trying to control all this time. The creature continued to say that this young man was just a mere mortal. Let him give up already. There is no reason for him to suffer like this. The dragon continued that if the main character asks him, then the deity will give him part of the power and make him the best dragon cook. After this, our character will no longer have the chance to control him. The monster chuckled and asked if he was ready for this. No one around them will know about their agreement. The main character firmly said that he didn't want it that way. The answer did not satisfy the dragon. Moting continued that his friends told him that he must definitely pass this test. The main character knew that his grandfather once said that a cook could not remain a cook if he could not control his own instrument. Now that this knife is in his hands, he must have complete control over it. After listening to his opponent, the dragon noticed that these were very loud words from mortals. For him, people seemed greedy and stupid. It seemed to him that they were always striving for power which did not belong to ordinary people. Since something happened that the creature did not expect, now the end of their meeting had come. Everything had to end. Moting didn't know what awaited him now. Most of all, it was really the time to die. The monster said that now the dragon's cook will know what death tastes like. Everything was shining brightly. The young man was completely illuminated. He saw nothing except bright rays. It seemed that he was about to be burned by a huge fiery ray. From the outside, it really looked like that, and only a bright flash. None of his friends could see either the dragon or the main character in this fight. The comrades began to worry about Moting. Our character fell to the ground completely exhausted. He could barely hold the knife in his hands. With his last strength, he tried to hold him back. His whole body was covered in bruises and blood. Poe remembered what happened to the last dragon cook who failed this test. The man simply went crazy. The goddess said that this would not happen. She had complete confidence in the guy. The princess could not allow this. She could not make a mistake about this boy. Therefore, the girl decided to help him with the help of her magic. Seeing what the 9th princess of the dragon family was doing, Poe was very surprised. Juzi used the verbal flow tactic. The main character's eyes became bloodshot, and the hands became red as if there was no skin on them but only muscles. It seemed that only the skeleton remained. All the organs had disappeared. The main character was reborn before our eyes. Observing what was happening with Moting, the dragon said that this was just the beginning. After this, there was a strong knock. It is unknown where a cauldron with boiling oil appeared. The cauldron of oil seemed as if it had been stolen from hell from the devil himself. The dragon reminded Moting that he could still think, and he had time to give up. If he does not change his mind, then a rain of hot oil awaits him. With the last of his strength, the main character said that he could not stay. The guy has been working towards this for a very long time. The main character cannot let himself down or the people who believe in him. Hearing such a statement, the dragon turned the cauldron over, from which oil began to flow. A strong stream of oil began to flow like a waterfall. This boiling water immediately fell on the head of the main character. Moting heard Juzi's voice immediately after this. The girl said that she did not know what the young man was going through. But he must remember that this is just a test. It is an illusion and should not be confused with reality. Moting must find a way out. The main character must hold on, and he can do it. The words of the goddess gave strength to our character. He realized that this test was an illusion. Because of this, he can and must find a way out. The dragon saw that his opponent was getting to his feet and said and asked if he was still staying because there was nothing wrong with just giving him a little. Since the main character decided not to stop, now 1,000 knives will pierce his body. After the words were spoken, knives appeared in space and flew straight towards Moting. The dragon insisted to the cook that he could not defeat him. He would turn him into minced meat. Moting was enveloped in steam and cutting pain. Mentally, the guy understood that the minced meat was just an illusion, but she was such that he could not cope with her yet. It really seemed like it was being cut into small pieces like minced meat. The main character remembered watching the cooking process as a child, and how his grandfather cut the minced meat. How hot oil on fire stung my hands. Mohong always said that it is very important to control the fire when frying meat. Grandfather was always interested in what his grandson was reading while he was cooking. The child was always interested in the notes of the 3 chefs from Zhejiang. Very cool knife techniques were described there. The boy always told his grandfather that if he knew how to cook all this, he would be as good a cook as his old man. Knives seemed very cool to the kid. He got pleasure from looking at his grandfather's work. Mohong could only dream that his grandson would actually become a chef. He understood that his hands could not work, although he was very active. Hearing the knives fall to the floor, the main character was struck by this sound. Moting began to work with his hands as if he had owned knives all his life. The dragon stood and watched what was happening as the knives that he launched at his opponent, instead of chopping him into mince, simply fell next to him on the floor. The dragon's surprise could not be conveyed. I saw such a monster for the first time. The main character was thinking intently about his own things. Our character finally understands what he needs to do to win this fight. Collecting all his thoughts, Moting did something that his opponent did not expect from him. The illusion within which this couple was located was destroyed, and they found themselves near the water. Now these two, instead of a black, incomprehensible place with boiling oil and hundreds of knives, were in a peaceful place. The dragon shouted that that boy had broken the illusion. He could not understand how this was possible. The main character explained that this was all obvious. He just realized that it was an illusion. The dragon could not hurt him, and what he felt at that time was only a deception of consciousness. His opponents did not try to kill him. It was something like a cooking lesson. The tests he went through had a pattern: hot oil, flames, parka, blades, and splitting. When the dragon said about minced meat, Moting realized that this was a normal cooking process. Everything turned out to be very simple. The boy himself became a kind of ingredient. Still, the dragon was surprised, and even if he understood this, that fear was impossible to overcome. The main character continued that the fire, hot oil, blades were very painful, but realizing that all this is on the other side of cooking, and every second of cooking is so important, that incredible concentration is necessary, and you need to enjoy it, and not think about anything, friend. The dragon cook thanked him for the indescribable sensations he received. After these words, the dragon understood what a great love for cooking was, and how she could help the guy. This youth was different from the previous dragon turns. In appearance, he seemed stupid to the children. The dragon reported that the test had been passed. Moting looked at his assistant with gratitude. The dragon continued that now the boy is ready to control his sharpest knife. A new chef is available. But the reaction of the main character was completely different, which greatly surprised the powerful creature. Our character said that they would talk about it later. The control over him up to 1,000 knives was very cool. He would like to remember it forever. Therefore, he proposed to repeat once again everything that he had gone through in illusion. For the dragon, this was the first person who asked for everything. The monster shouted that in front of him was not a cook, but a real psycho. To which he received the answer that how dare he talk to his master and let him hurry up, since he is not going to waste time on empty chatter. Moting really wanted to repeat everything again. In the space of Tai, Juzi pinched the main character and wanted to bring him to his senses. The goddess shouted to him that he was a fool. She was wondering if he had received her message. She woke him up and could not allow him to die in an illusion. Po tried to stop the hostess and asked him to handle the guy's body more carefully since he was badly wounded, and no one knew what was happening to him there. Juicy Bird brought a letter. It was a postal crane. The dragon took the letter in her hands and opened it. It was written there that a lot of time had passed, and the plea that the dragon cook return to the restaurant went throughout the kingdom. Therefore, the sender of the letter would like to visit Tyote's house tomorrow to taste the feast of 8 divine dishes. The letter was sent by the righteous Tai. Po noticed that this was too much. He was just mocking them. Motino's life and mind are now in danger. What 8 dishes can we talk about, and even for tomorrow? This news was terrible for Juzi. The friends immediately left Taya's space and were transported to their estate. Returning to Teot's house, they had a lot to think about. The princess was in a panic. What should they do now since Moting lay motionless? All this time he was just sleeping. The spirit of the Teot house asked that he had not woken up yet. Po hoped that the guy would be able to deal with it all quickly, like last time. The goddess added that Moting does not know anything about the 8 divine dishes, about preparation, processing. Knife technique is not the same thing. He didn't even train. Po hastened to remind that in any case, their lease of space had not ended yet, so they can go there again when he wakes up and practice. This arrangement did not suit the dragon, because even if the cook knows how to prepare the dish, the ingredients that make them up are very rare, and it is almost impossible to find them in one day. Juzi suggested to Po that he should pack up and run. She will take him to the ground where he can eat and drink as much as he wants. The spirit did not like this proposal. He hoped that the girl was joking, because this is a crime against heaven, and if she is caught when she goes to Earth, she will die. The dragon princess saw no other way out. Moting continued to sleep all this time. His eyes opened, but he was in another space. All this time he was still in the world of illusions. This is the first cook to torture a dragon so badly. Moting reasoned that it turns out that the steam is evenly distributed inside and outside the ingredients. But with good control, it can create a rich texture and flavor. The main character asked to repeat the cooking processes again. The dragon was shocked. He already told him that this was the 3rd time and he passed the test perfectly. The monster approved of him. So why can't this guy calm down? Our character claimed that this is a unique experience. Chefs can evaluate dishes only by appearance and smell, but now he can remember every detail of preparation. This opportunity cannot be missed. The monster thought that the guy had already understood a lot of things, but since he has limited energy reserves, he couldn't help him anymore. Our character did not like this attitude. The young man shouted that the best knife of 3 meters was in front of him, so let him work and not shirk. Once again, this couple repeated the stages of preparation. There was a hot flame right away. Next is hot oil, and finally 1,000 blades. Mo Ting appeared to be a maniac who wanted to experience these sensations more and more on himself. Even the monster no longer had the strength to do this. The dragon repeated that he had already done this more than 300 times and asked him to give him a rest. There was really nothing more he could do. Knife thought that if this were not a world of imagination, then he would have the opportunity to escape, since this cook is really crazy. We need to deal with it less in the future. The main character said that perhaps it was really time for him to leave this world and return to his friends. The dragon's eyes sparkled with happiness. The monster began to ask the young man to just let him out, and he would do whatever he wanted. But with this cook, it was not so simple. Our character pushed off from the water and jumped up. Mo Ting jumped onto the dragon's head and asked him to tell the sharpest knife about the skills of all the dragon's cooks. The monster agreed to tell us a little about his predecessors. Our character was a little unhappy, and he said that then, it would be better for them to continue working on what they had been doing all this time. Out of fright, the dragon agreed, and promised that he would tell everything he knew. The story began with the fact that the dragon's first cook liked to smell his hands. Mo Ting agreed because he also liked it and asked to continue further. Juzi tied Mo Ting to the table. Po asked if she really wanted to do this. The dragon is sure that Po needs to take the guy and hide since she is responsible for the dragon's cook, so she must stay here. He must be protected. He must not be allowed to escape. She will take care of him. Suddenly a strong wind arose. He didn't understand what was happening. The skies turned pink-orange and began to disperse. A bright flash appeared. It became clear that unwanted guests were coming to them. Columns of rays began to descend from the clouds. The shadow of those who had arrived to visit began to appear on the ground. Bright rays illuminated Juzi and Po. In front of them stood an expensive car with 2 guards. The door from the sports car rose up. The leg of the owner of this sports car appeared. The 9th Dragon Princess was surprised, and before them appeared Tai, the owner of the space in which they had been training yesterday. The goddess looked at his clothes and wanted to tell him something about them, but the man interrupted and said that he had been wearing them for hundreds of centuries. There is nothing surprising here because Hawaiian shirts are very comfortable. Looking at Taote's house, he began to laugh because today it was completely different. It used to have hundreds of floors, but I've never seen it like this before. The man's attention was attracted by a guy sitting on a chair. The guest shared that during this time, he learned a little information about the dragon cook, who had never cooked. Friends wondered how the owner of the space knew this information. The goddess thought that the guest was in the human world. Tai confirmed that she herself showed him the way, and the cooking that his old man prepares is quite tasty. The goddess realized that this man was following her. The honorable guest said that he asked the Jade Emperor whether he should worry about her. When the previous cook died, such an unreliable dragon as the girl went in search of a new one. No one knew that she would fall asleep for hundreds of years after a good feast. Tai continued that Jiuzi knows everything perfectly well, that the realities of the divine and demonic world are very different from the human, and the only tangent to these lands is cooking. She must have thought how disgusting it was to feed on the winds and these tasteless elixirs while the girl below was resting. So the return of the dragon cook caused a lot of noise among the 3 worlds. Therefore, the Jade Emperor wanted to send the girl to hard labor on the Northern Sea. But the guest persuaded him to give her one last chance, and these are 8 divine dishes. The princess said that there is no problem with the dishes, but they do not yet have the necessary ingredients. The girl thinks that the Jade Emperor should understand that there is nothing here for the guest to eat, but Tai turned out to be prudent. The owner of the car ordered his assistants to open the trunk of the car. The owner of the Tout house was amazed, since all the pre-prepared ingredients for this dish were in the car. Tai said that if this dragon cook can prepare the 8 divine dishes, it will bring glory to Juzi, and everyone will recognize her exhausting quest, and if not, then the girl will go to the North Sea. The goddess was angry because this man had been eating and drinking with her for years, and now he was doing this to her. Juzi said that since the 8 divine dishes are the most famous dish, which was developed more than 5,000 years ago by the dragon cook Yi Ya, there is not a single recipe left in all 3 worlds. This dish can only be prepared if Yi Ya himself rises from the dead. Out of anger, the girl's hand began to turn into the hand of a dragon. The goddess shouted that he might be able to send her to the Northern Sea, but first the girl would beat the crap out of him. The 9th princess of the dragon family was ready to begin the battle. The guest replied that on her part it was all stupid. Tai also applied the magic he possessed. The man's magic turned out to be stronger than the goddess. Unfortunately, the girl was bound by the chains of his power. The guest hastened to remind that he was sent by the Jade Emperor. Challenging his will could land her in the grave, so the dragon needs to pray for his future. Tai heard someone's voice with an order to let the girl go. The man turned around to see who was addressing him so disrespectfully. The guest saw in the one on which a few minutes ago the sleeping cook was still sitting. Now that place was empty. Juzi saw that Mo Ting had woken up. The dragon cook actually stood before them, as if he had just woken up from sleep. and was not undergoing a 10-day test with a knife. Suddenly, the ground began to disappear from under the feet of the uninvited guest. He was very scared and thought that it might be an earthquake. In fact, everything was very simple. The dragon's cook changed. And now the house of Teot began to change. A huge beam of light appeared behind the main character, which completely changed his house. The owners of the house looked and were surprised that the house was changing its appearance again. Many mirrored floors began to appear. From a small eatery, it turned into an expensive restaurant that looked like a skyscraper from the human world. This skyscraper was unknown how many floors Mo Ting compared to his restaurant seemed like a small bug. The top floor of Taote's new house was right in the clouds. The spirit of the house began to cry. Po did not believe that this was true, and that the house could change. And the goddess thought to herself that the young man had mastered the knife after all. Even so, the house shouldn't have changed that much. Tai approached the dragon's cook and asked if he knew the true reason for his appearance. Mo Ting, I heard that while he was unconscious he needed to prepare 8 divine dishes. It was easy for him. The guest was not satisfied with such a rude answer. He told him to roll his lip because he was too young, and he needed to learn modesty. And the fact that this particular guy became a dragon cook was a big mistake. Tai Yi said that when he traveled to the human world, he met a young man named Huang Tian. That guy was much more talented than Mo Ting, and he was the one who should have become the dragon's chef. Hearing the name of the opponent, the main character remembered that moment from the past. How Huang Tian and his father came to the Mo family's restaurant and disgraced them. Our character could not resist him earlier through his illness and defend the honor of the family. The guy remembered how he was on his knees, and how he made a promise that he would return and restore the good name of his family. With anger, the dragon's cook said that he simply had not tried normal food. Tai was infuriated by this. He ordered that he should do what he wants. But this brat will not be the dragon's cook. Mo Ting's hands filled with strength. It no longer mattered to him whether he would be the dragon's cook or not. Today he will show the unexpected guest what power he has, and that it is he who will be able to prepare that delicacy that everyone so wants to try. The 8 divine dishes is a famous dish created by the ancient culinary master Yi Ya after he became a dragon chef. It is prepared from 8 extremely rare ingredients: heavenly lake divine clam meat, golden wheat, 1,000-year-old polymer leaves, heavenly ginseng root, devil's tail, jade bamboo shoot, purest soul crayfish, and 9 royal phoenix wings. Some of these ingredients are found in places inaccessible even to immortals, and are very difficult to find or grow. They say that when I first prepared this dish, the whole of heaven was filled with its aroma, and everyone who tasted this creation said that it was the best he had ever tasted. It is known that after eating the 8 divine dishes, the power of some gods increased. This was truly wonderful. Since this dish was a divine dish for dragons, everyone wanted to try it, so Tai Yi decided to test the skills of the new chef. To the surprise of everyone, Mo Ting accepted the challenge to cook this dish. Juzi was very worried here because he had just woken up and didn't know anything about him. The main character asked if he prepared 8 divine dishes. What would Mr. Tai say to this? The unexpected guest said that of course he would immediately recognize his skill as a dragon cook. The young man thought this was not enough. Mr. Tai asked what else he wanted. Our character set the condition that if he prepares 8 divine dishes, then the representatives of the Jade Emperor will recognize themselves as snaggletooth slaves, and Juzi's case will be closed. Even a goddess could not afford such impudence. Tai boiled. He shouted, "How dare this child talk to him like that? He even has no idea who is in front." The guy continued that he was sitting quietly at home, but since the much-respected Jiuzi kidnapped him for no apparent reason and brought him here, this matter will need to be hushed up somehow. He cannot thank her with anything else since she healed his hands, and so he's going to repay her with a good job in the title of Dragon Cook. However, Tai came to the territory of Teote's house and began to accuse everyone around. It's clear that Mo Ting is not happy with this. Why should he just cook for this stranger? The Jade Emperor's envoy argued that the customer is always right, and as the dragon's cook, he is obliged to serve him right now. Mo Ting insisted on his own and argued that the cook should cook food with his soul, just as the client should feel the dish with his heart. Even if he is forced to cook, what will come out can then be called a dish. In this case, the guest had no choice but to agree to play by the boy's rules. If the cook prepared 8 divine dishes, then Tai would immediately apologize to them and admit that he was a snaggletooth serf. But if the young man fails, then he will not only deprive him of the title of Dragon Chef, but also make his hands the same as before. And when the time comes, Huang Tan will become the new Dragon Chef. Moreover, Juzi will be punished twice as severely for being an unsuitable candidate. The spirit of the Teot house began to object that they did not agree, and it was not for this person to decide what the punishment for the goddess would be. Mo Ting put his hand on Tai Yi's hand. Now was an excellent opportunity to show off his skills and prove that he was the best chef in the Mo family. The Huang family are his opponents, to whom he had already bowed his head and asked for an apology through his illness. The mistress of the Toyote house saw this touch, and the spirit of the house almost fainted. The protagonist squeezed the hand of the Jade Emperor's envoy and said that he agreed to his terms. The deal was concluded. The two parties to the contract went to Toyote's new home. Mr. Taya's assistant said that this new cook looked somehow strange. 8 treasures are too valuable. Wasn't it wasteful of the guest to offer all this as ingredients? After all, this is indeed a very rare material. The bodyguard of the representative of the Jade Emperor was wondering why he did this. The unexpected guest told him his secret, but the fact is that he does not have 8 treasures. For several 1,000 years, he has only tried them together with the Jade Emperor. It turns out that he is deceiving this guy. It wasn't exactly a hoax. It's hard to gather the main ingredients of this dish. It is even more difficult to obtain auxiliary ingredients. But the worst thing is putting it all together. Some ingredients are not very rare, such as shining ice crayfish. One of the assistants suggested that this might make the dragon cook's task easier, to which the owner of Taya's space laughed, because this would not be a relief, but on the contrary, would only aggravate the cooking process. This dish is not as easy to prepare as it seems. In the kitchen, Mo Ting mastered the new equipment and ingredients that were presented to him. The spirit of the Toyote house was getting acquainted with its new possessions. But he was joyful. He didn't even know that the house could be so transformed thanks to a knife. The spirit continued that for greater success, the cook would need to prepare as many special dishes as possible. Our #1 sharpest culinary tool in the 3 worlds. It was Manhwa Tin who recognized him as his master. He couldn't believe it. Looking at Juzi, who sat motionless all this time and burned the boy with her gaze. The dragon thought that what was standing in front of her was not the dragon's cook, but a bully who bet on her double punishment. She couldn't understand how this was even possible. The spirit flew up to his friend and realized that she was still angry about that argument. A mirror fell to the floor and broke. Po and Jiuzi paid attention to this. They were even surprised at what could have happened, because they did not notice anything and were only deep in their thoughts. On the other side of the kitchen, Mo Ting was just examining the crayfish, which was among the ingredients brought by Tai Yi. Naturally, the crayfish didn't like this, and he pinched the cook, who was considering him as a future dish, so beautifully with his claws on the nose and with such force that the guy began to bleed. Mo Ting shouted for this stupid cancer to let go of his nose and received a request from the 9th princess of the Dragon Clan for the cancer, on the contrary, to kill this bastard, so that he rips off his nose, and as quickly and as much as possible. Po laughed, looking at all this, and did not understand how he even thought of using an ordinary kitchen knife to cope with cancer of the purest soul. This is an immortal crayfish that lives in a jade pond, and its combat power is so amazing that even immortals could not defeat it the first time. If Mr. Tai had not pacified him with the help of talismans, then the dragon cook would have gotten much more. Remembering that Mo Ting wields the sharpest knife, he summoned it. The main character's hand began to glow as if a huge unknown force had infused it. A magical sharp knife appeared in the young man's hand, with which he swung and killed the crayfish. This glorious warrior died a painless death. Ma Ting didn't expect him to be so aggressive. Under this knife, everything is living and inanimate. Every ingredient is just food. He needs to finally understand this. The young man turned to the knife with a request to give him the opportunity to cut. Raising the knife above himself, the dragon cook swung at the crayfish, which was lying on the cutting board. The young man had thoughts in his head that someone was hungry and he should not stop. The dragon and the spirit of the Toyote house watched as the chef wielded the knife. Suddenly they saw the guy freeze and not move. Po hurried to ask what happened and reminded him that he needed to hurry up with the ingredients. Mo Ting asked Juzi about how valuable this cancer is. The goddess replied that of course, he was very valuable, since it lives in a jade pond at a depth of 9,000 m. The mammal is unusually strong and rare. The guy brought the ingredient to his friends and asked them to look at it carefully. What they saw surprised them very much. The fact is that it was a female and she carries eggs. Mo Ting immediately came up with a plan to artificially breed such valuable sea animals. Looking at the cabinet, which was the passage to the royal garden, the fog and steam of that world came out of it. Indeed, that idea turned out to be very tempting. And that's where our heroes went. All kinds of birds and animals existing in the 3 worlds are present in the royal garden. Juzi and Po sat on the riverbank and looked into the distance. Mo Ting called out to them to look into the water. The main character released crayfish eggs into the river. In a matter of minutes, the eggs grew and became huge mammals. Looking around, these creatures themselves did not understand how they ended up in this pond and what they were doing here, because a man started chasing them. Our character caught several crayfish with both hands, saying what a great catch. His friends watched all this in surprise. The guy noticed that catching these crayfish is much more dangerous than catching anything else. Jiuzi was happy that finally Taote's house would start making money. Now they were saved. The 9th princess of the Dragon Clan turned to her cook, and decided to ask him again if he had ever prepared the 8 divine dishes. Naturally, the girl received the answer that, of course, he never did this. But what surprised the goddess most of all was the expression on his face when he said this. The dragon ordered him not to smile anymore. If he does not prepare 8 dishes, then it will be the end for everyone. Mo Ting turned to his friend and asked her to relax. He picked up the talisman. Having replaced him, he ordered the dragon to get out of the knife. The blade immediately began to obey its master. It lit up with bright rays. Juzi and Po watched everything that was happening in fascination. A few seconds later, a huge dragon, whom they had seen for the first time, appeared in front of the owners of the Teot house. For this couple, he was very scary and angry. Seeing the expression of the muzzle from which the dragon from his amulet came out, Mo Ting ordered him to make his face simpler. There is no one to scare here. The goddess was furious at what she heard. She shouted to the main character that his ancestors were great people, and that he should not take risks with their history. Po added that if he did not stop, then the guy would be denied a direct path to his relatives in the next world. The knife dragon rose and began to change shape. The owners of the Teot house thought that the main character had screwed up, and his knife was angry at the words spoken to him. The radiance that came from the transformation of the sharp knife blinded the eyes of Juzi and Po. To their great surprise, the dragon became small and sank into Mo Ting's hand and addressed him as a master, saying that he was at his service and was awaiting further orders. The dragon's cook asked his mentor if he knew how to prepare crayfish of the purest soul. The dragon of the knife asked if he understood correctly that this was the purest cancer of the soul from the 8 divine dishes. Naturally, a sharp knife already knew how to do all this. Therefore, he began to tell that crayfish of the purest soul is one of the 8 divine treasures. They live in the jade pond and have an extraordinary taste. The meat of this crayfish is soft and snow-white thanks to the energy of water and ice that the crayfish absorbs throughout its life. Dishes made from it are not only an exquisite delicacy, but also have a beneficial effect on the powers of the immortals. Particularly important additional products are bilocan leaves, rootless water, which means rainwater or water freshly drawn from a well, flowers of the goddess of illusions. These 33 spices are prepared within 79 hours. Returning to the kitchen of his restaurant, Mo Ting realized that it was not just as he thought. After reviewing all the ingredients he had, the guy saw through the unexpected guest. The young man did not find all the ingredients he needed among what Tai gave him, and this greatly complicates the cook's task. The main character turned to Po with a request that he look for them in the garden of 1,000 herbs. The spirit of Teot's house replied that this was impossible. The current level of the house does not allow for growing ingredients of such rarity in the garden. The 9th princess of the dragon family was angry. She realized that this time the old man really cheated. Laughter could be heard from the room in which Mr. Tai was waiting for his dish. The representative of the Jade Emperor wanted to see the facial expressions of the goddess. After all, he understood that the girl should have already understood that they did not have the necessary ingredients for the ordered dish. Although they are immortal, they are not very good cooks. Mo Ting asked about the ingredients needed for this dish and what exactly were missing in Teot's house. Even if they have already realized this, then these 3 have no time to search for spices, and they will finally kneel before him. This is exactly what the guest was looking for. The suckers who worked with this man exalted the man and said that he was the brightest and truly brilliant. Taya didn't like the way he was called blessed. He would prefer to be called the most insidious. In the kitchen, Juzi and Po panicked. They didn't know what to do now. Laughter could be heard from Taya's room through the ventilation. Po understood that this scoundrel was laughing at them. The dragon princess was angry. She wanted to talk to this nasty old man right now. The spirit of the house tried to calm her down. He asked the cook to come up with something. The main character asked Po to show him all the ingredients that were in Teot's house. Not knowing why this was needed, the spirit immediately fulfilled the cook's request. What good could this be, since there is nothing useful there anyway? Still, Po showed what they had in the garden. The young man carefully examined and studied all the plants. It took Mo Ting some time to understand what exactly he needed. All this time, Po was grumbling that there was nothing here and this was a bad idea. The cook is just wasting his time. Finally, the guy found what he needed. The guy clapped and shouted that it was wonderful. Juzi and Po did not understand what was happening to him. They are now hanging by a thread between life and death, and the young man is rejoicing like crazy. Pointing his finger at some ingredients in the corner, our character asked Po to prepare them. Taking a sharp knife in his hands and returning to the cook's place, Mo Ting suggested that everyone get to work. The spirit of the house immediately began to carry out the order of the new cook. The way Mo Ting cut the crayfish was very elegant. It was impossible to take your eyes off this process. The guy deftly began to manipulate the knife. The skill surprised everyone present. Jiuzi and Po could not believe that in front of them was really standing the same insecure Mo Ting, who a few days ago could not even pick up a knife. A few minutes later, the problem was resolved. The dish we ordered was prepared. The dragon's cook took the tasting order to the client. The assistants who were with Tai all this time looked at the dish and said that it looked somehow too simple. In turn, the guest asked whether the real 8 divine dishes were actually in front of him. Mo Ting was not as cunning as his client. He immediately said that it was not entirely true. This angered the guest. He demanded to know what exactly this guy meant. If he tries to deceive him, then he will still face punishment. Turning around to leave, Tai Yi added that since he was a dragon cook and could not fulfill the order of an immortal, he did not pass the test. Let him now await the wrath of the Jade Emperor. Juzi thought that this would be the end of them. The main character was not at a loss. He pushed back his chair and sat down at the table in front of the dish he had prepared. Mo Ting said that the purest soul crayfish is a creation of heaven and earth, the most valuable component of which is the pulp is crystal white and smooth, and the delicious use of the purest soul crayfish in dishes should preserve the taste of all ingredients as much as possible. Slow cooking with various seasonings can give excellent results, but it will lose its authentic flavor. Such a speech made Mr. Tai stop. Our character continued that crayfish live in a very cold abyss, so their flesh is so tough that it is difficult to chew. That's exactly why it's slow simmering with lots of spices. There is a better way to cook this meat and soften its texture. Mr. Tai's assistants were talking among themselves that this boy knows a lot. The client himself noted that the chef himself understands this is the only way to preserve the taste in a dish for 1,000 years. Mo Ting reported that this is not entirely true, which plunged everyone present into misunderstanding. It became especially interesting to Mr. Tai why she thought so. The irritated guest turned around, pointing his finger at the chef, and shouted that he was an upstart. If he thinks that he will surpass Yi Wan, then this is not so. Behind me, I could hear the assistants whispering that this was going to be an interesting show. Mo Ting said that naturally he does not think that he has surpassed Chef Yi Ya, but the development of culinary art involves innovation and discovery. The chef's first ever crawfish dish was an unprecedented creation, but that's not the only way to prepare it. Mo Ting hastened to say that in his hometown, in order to preserve the freshness and tenderness of fish and crayfish for as long as possible, a unique cooking method was created that also preserves the beneficial properties of all ingredients. In the human world, it is called shredding. This term means finely chopped meat on one side and fresh meat on the other. Together, they get fresh, finely chopped meat that can be eaten. From ancient times to the present day, this method has been used to create true delicacies. Countless people around the world believe that this is the best way to consume seafood. That is why today's dish Mo Ting prepared was not a crayfish stew of the purest soul. The chef's hand reached out to the lid that covered the surprise dish. When the cook opened the dish, an aroma fell from him, which immediately spread throughout the room, and the dish that stood in front of them seemed to satisfy all human receptors of the eye, smell, and taste. Before the guests and owners of the house, there was a shredded cancer of the purest soul. The presentation that Mo Ting made was unsurpassed. It could not be expressed in words. In appearance, it resembled an animal in some unusually beautiful place. Everything was so neat and beautiful. If you look closely at the dish, it was as if particles of starry dust were falling on it. Looking at all this, Mr. Taya believed that in front of him was a beautiful landscape and it was incredible. Juzi and Po didn't know what to say. They had never seen such beauty before. The dragon cook began to tell the presentation in this dish the petals were made from crayfish meat. Since crayfish meat is tough only if it is cut thick, but the thin pieces are soft and tender, so Mo Ting cut the crayfish into 3,600 thin slices to make each petal tender, smooth, crunchy, and melt in your mouth. Seafood meat has a cool aura that keeps it fresh for a long time. Tai knew that it was very tender, but it should not be eaten without everything, because the cold aura is too strong. The young man continued that this is why he decided to add fireflower petals from Tyote's house to neutralize the temperature. The 2 leaves of this herb were cut into minute patterns. However, they were not divided, but formed a flower. Well, that was not all. The stream next to the carved tree was a special sauce for meat of the purest soul. It gives light meat a richer taste. To get all the colors of taste, you need to dip the petal in the sauce. Taking advantage of the moment when Mr. Tai was fascinated by the appearance and characteristics of the dish, Mo Ting walked up to him and put his hand directly on his shoulder and hugged his first client. The dragon's cook brought chopsticks with a slice of crayfish to the guest's mouth and offered to try the dishes. From the aroma and appearance of a particle of the dish that came from the piece that was near Mr. Tai's mouth, it was hard to resist trying it. Mo Ting immediately decided to turn the fork in the other direction, reminding him that he had not prepared a crayfish stew of the purest soul. Does the distinguished guest agree to judge this dish? The client convinced the cook by saying not to worry because China was beaten in front of him, and he swears that if this dish is really tasty, he will not do anything bad to him. To which the main character asked the gentleman himself whether he believed his words. Juzi hurried to calm Mo Ting so that he would not worry since the immortal is faithful to his taste buds. Moreover, there are many eyewitnesses here. Hearing his friend's words, the main character calmed down. Having wished bon appetit, the client began the tasting. After the first piece went into the mouth of the respected guest, he was silent for some time. His assistants ran up to him and asked what had happened. Since Mr. Tai sat motionless, his people begged him to say at least something. Having tried the dishes in China, I got the impression that his receptors all seemed to explode like fireworks. The man began to absorb another piece after piece and could not stop. His assistants asked him to eat more slowly as he might choke, because in one instant the guest had eaten almost half the plate. Since the owner of the Thai space was silent, his assistants also touched and tasted the cooked crayfish. They were afraid that there would not be a piece left for them. Watching everything that was happening, how these foolish people were eating, Mo Ting said that they had just never eaten real food before. In a matter of seconds, the plate was empty. Mr. Tai was annoyed. It was a shame for him that his servants had no manners and climbed into his plate of food. Jiuzi turned to the guest. She had one unresolved question for him. The princess was interested in the client's opinion whether Mo Ting had the right to be a dragon cook, and the girl believed that he was worthy of it. The Jade Emperor's representative said that this is still in question. Such words angered the owner of the Toyota house. Tai corrected himself and said that he wanted crayfish stew of the purest soul. But since the dragon cook prepared shredded crayfish of the purest soul, it was not exactly what was requested at first. Po began to boil with anger, realizing that he was planning something again. The guest continued that, however, this dish was magnificent. Knife work, the shape is perfect, but unfortunately too small. Everything was eaten very quickly and the client did not taste anything. Mo Ting understood what the guest was getting at. To put it bluntly, he was not satisfied with the food. Taya's assistants joined the conversation and said that the portions were so small and it was impossible to eat enough. The client did not like the way his charges were behaving. He pulled the pants and pulled them towards him. Tai said that he would send his gluttons to catch crayfish and ask the cook to cook more. His assistants said that there was no problem. They would go right now and find as many as they could. The main character smiled and said that there is no problem in this since they have many crayfish of the purest soul. The young man turned to Po to show the guests their royal garden because thanks to them they were able to learn a lot of lessons from the caviar that was found in the crayfish, which was presented as the main ingredient for the dish. Mr. Tai did not expect such a turn of events. The cook said that they could eat all this in his restaurant. The boy also said that there was an unlimited supply of shredded crayfish only in Taiot's house, of course, for a reasonable price. And he pulled out a menu that included the cost of crayfish of the purest soul of crystals. The client agreed to the specified price. Mr. Tai ordered his assistant to get the chest and open so that the owners of the house can see that he is not deceiving them and is ready to pay for this concoction. The main characters were speechless from how much money was in the box. Tai was indeed willing to pay a lot of gold crystals. The guest officially stated that Mo Ting is worthy of being a dragon cook. The client also continued that Juzi had been wandering around the human world for 100 years to find the dragon cook and return him to his place. He would personally inform the Jade Emperor about this today. And Tai will order his cook to make crayfish dumplings, which he will buy at Toyota's house. Everyone on all sides shouted and greeted Mo Ting with the well-deserved title of Dragon Cook. Tears rolled into my eyes. He cried with joy as his tout house was finally growing. The goddess was happy that finally the dragon's cook had found his place, and now Toyota's house was finally opening. Analyzing everything that was happening, Mo Ting still could not believe that he was a dragon cook. At that time in Yizhou, in Mo Ting's hometown, it was night. Mo Hong sat on the terrace and thought that more than 10 days had already passed. The old man was worried about his grandson. He didn't know where he was now. A transition from another world appeared in the courtyard again, in which the shadow of the main character was visible. The guy called his grandfather. The old man thought that perhaps his old eyes were deceiving him, and that what he saw was just an illusion. The old man's eyes did not deceive. It was not a desired illusion, but everything in reality. After a few minutes, Mo Ting's body became more clearly visible in the transition between worlds. Mo Hong looked and didn't know how else this could be explained. His beloved and only grandson was heading straight towards him, behind whom there were 2 more shadows waving after him. Appearing in the courtyard, Mo Ting immediately rushed to his grandfather with hugs. The main character admitted how much he missed him all this time. The young man had accumulated a lot of things that he had to tell his grandfather. This is what he did as soon as they went into the house. Mo Ting told what happened to him during these 10 days. Now Mo Hong could be proud of his grandson because he was a real dragon cook. Grandfather realized that the legend about the ancestors turned out to be true. The knife has a great origin, and this time the gods blessed baby Tina. Only on this occasion should the head of the family go and burn incense. In turn, our character asked the old man not to worry about him. He wanted him to taste a delicacy from another world that he had prepared himself. The boy brought him here to thank his only relative because it was believed that this food fills the body with strength. Since grandfather is not in very good health, He should feel better after tasting a few pieces. Taking one slice with chopsticks, Mo Hong began to examine how the work was done. In appearance, it was not bad. The presentation were also appropriate. But the form was not yet perfect. He wondered what it tasted like. Putting a piece in his mouth, grandfather began to carefully chew the crayfish meat. Mo Ting couldn't wait to find out what it tasted like. The old man began to describe what his receptors sensed. It was crispy, sweet, cold, and refreshing to the meat, and that leaf was a perfect neutral against the extra cold. This food seemed perfect. Unfortunately, something went wrong. It became clear from the grandfather's eyes that his body was changing. His eyes narrowed and became bloodshot. The old man aggressively threw his chopsticks on the table. Mo Ting looked at his grandfather's transformations and did not understand what was happening to him now. Before our eyes, the elder of the people turned from an unusual elderly man into a devil. It seemed as if a demon had entered his body. The main character asks his grandfather what is happening. Mo Hong's face turned red and scary. It looks like he turned into a demon. The grandson tried to shout to his grandfather, but he did not hear him. The main character asked him not to scare him too much and explained what happened to him. The grandfather's eyes looked like the eyes of the devil. They had no pupils, and they glowed strongly. The skin turned bright red. It was as if he had just come out of hell. The power that was in the body of the elderly man greatly surprised the main character. Angrily, the grandfather broke something very precious to the Mo family. Mo Ting shouted for grandfather to stop because it was his precious teapot made of ice and clay, which the old man had kept for decades. Because of what was happening in the kitchen, even frightened mice ran away from the house. There were also valuable utensils in the kitchen. Mo Hong did not stop. Being embittered and wild, he smashed everything he saw on his way. The guy shouted to somehow stop him, because the vessel that the grandfather approached was left to him from his ancestors. The elder of the family did not even try to listen to his grandson. He had the only goal of destroying everything. In a matter of seconds, all the dishes that had been stored for several centuries, all very valuable to the Mo family, were broken and scattered throughout the kitchen. Our character did not know what was happening. He had no idea why it all started and what exactly caused such violent and aggressive behavior. The aggression of the elder of the family did not go away for more than 1%. Mo Hong was interested in the portrait that hung on the wall. Looking at him carefully, the old man saw that a spider was climbing there and weaving a web. From what he saw, the grandfather's eyes began to shine. He was already planning to do something. Mo Ting rushed to stop the old man, grabbed him by the jacket and shouted that this was too much. Let him not touch at least the portraits of his ancestors. The grandson begged him to stop committing vandalism. The old man shouted to his grandson to let him go. Suddenly, in the dining room, where everything was happening, a bright light appeared and a transition to another world. The bright lighting blinded the guy, and he asked his grandfather to wake up. The goddess of food appeared in the dining room of the Mo family's house. Jiuzi extended her hand and brought it to Mo Hong's face. The girl used magic to pacify the old man. Mo Ting looked frightened at her friend, who appeared on time. He was grateful to the dragon that she had come to his aid. The princess turned to her cook and asked what he had done. On the roof of the house lay a huge fat red cat, which did everything from sleeping, eating, and meowing. He had a hectic and carefree life. Together with Juzi, Po also came to the human world. He helped his friend and made a cold compress for his grandfather. Applying a cold cloth to the old man's forehead, the spirit of the Tyote house said that thanks to the dragon, he should now feel better. The dragon nurse was angry and swore at Mo Ting. The princess found out that he stole the purest soul of crayfish and fed it to his grandfather. The main character didn't understand why she was screaming like that. After all, he just wanted to thank the old man in this way. The goddess of food explained that humans and immortals have different bodies. Why did the young man even think that people can eat divine food? It is almost fatal for them. But the young man did not understand what his girlfriend meant. He thought that she was just greedy for this cancer. Po tried to explain that this was not what the dragon meant. She just wanted to convey to the guy that heavenly ingredients absorb divine energy that does not exist in the earthly world. If a mortal cannot digest a divine dish, serious problems may arise. Since Mo Ting became the dragon's cook, he was considered a half-divine being, and this did not apply to him. His body calmly digested all the divine ingredients. This cannot be said about the old man, and even at his age. For him, one piece of this dish feels like 100 ginseng roots at a time. Finally, Mo Ting realized that he had just done. With his good intentions, he almost sent his grandfather to another world to his ancestors. The calmed-down Juzi said that it was all in the past. It's very good that they managed to prevent what could have happened. The main character understood and accepted his mistake. He said that he was to blame for what happened, and thanked his friends who came to the rescue in time and saved his grandfather. After apologizing to his friends, the young man looked ahead and was horrified. Mo Hong, who only a few seconds ago was lying on the bed and sleeping, disappeared somewhere. For some reason, on the roof of the Mo family's house, the cat tensed up. Mo Ting looked out the window and saw an old man running along the roof of the house straight towards the cat. The grandson shouted to his grandfather what he was doing there and to come down quickly. The goddess said that while she was talking with the cook, she forgot to cast a spell on the grandfather and therefore he rushed to continue performing feats. When morning came, our character approached his grandfather to see if he had woken up. He opened his eyes and lowered his legs, sitting on the bed. The old man saw that next to him was his grandson, and a girl who had taken him with her to another world and some unknown creature with them. Grandfather turned to Mo Ting with a question about how he himself thinks, how he might be feeling now. If you look at Mo Hong, he looked great. He looked rested and healthy. The rays that fell on his body made him seem like some kind of deity. Grandfather himself said that he looked quite strong, so there was no need for his grandson to worry. The young man immediately decided to respond to his grandfather with a compliment that in appearance he seemed to look younger. The fact that the grandson was happy, standing and smiling, this clearly did not please him and he hit him with a cane. The old man answered the main character that how dare he say that, because if it weren't for this girl, he would have killed him. One has only to look at his precious Yixing clay teapot, the family vessel. It was all broken and broken. Despite how angry the grandfather was, Mo Ting still objected to him that he broke it all himself without his help. Seeing something he had done, grandfather was very disappointed with his behavior at night. Old man Mo even sat down and wrote down in his diary how difficult it was for him to find words to describe the pain and humiliation he experienced when he realized that he had destroyed family heirlooms. The goddess turned to Mo Hong about contentment and asked him not to kill himself like that. The girls were able to easily fix it all. To do this, she just needed to use her magic a little. The first thing the magic of the food goddess touched was a precious teapot made of Yixing clay and a family heirloom vessel. Next were the remaining pots, which were also made from very rare material. The goddess, with her magic, returned everything that Mo Hong had broken at night to its place in its original form. There was not a single flaw, not a single fragment remained. The grandson ran up to the old man and asked him to look around since everything was already in its place as before. It was not visible that it had been broken a few seconds ago. Jiuzi said that even though Mo Ting acted like a fool, grandfather's body survived and he became stronger than before. Mo Hong thanked our immortals for correcting his heir's mistake and saving his life. The Mo family will now repay the virtues. The ninth princess hurried to tell why they came to the human world. Firstly, to save Mo. Secondly, so that the old man would teach Mo Ting his skills. And thirdly, they wanted to see land cuisine to diversify their menu. Mo Hong promised that he would not upset the immortals since people cannot lose face in front of the gods. The main character hastened to share with her grandfather that the gods, it turns out, don't know how to cook at all. The guy continued that immortals either eat raw or stale bread, and there are situations when the hungriest eat the wind. The cook even boasted that his imperfectly shredded crayfish made even Taya's mouth water. After listening to his grandson, Mo Hong could not believe that it was true. The dragon confirmed that this is so. The world of immortals is impressive, but has no culinary talent at all, so they choose an ordinary person to be the dragon's cook, and now this title belongs to this inept guy. Mo Ting became a star and told his grandfather that now his grandson bears this title. The main character quickly took out a sharp divine knife to show his grandfather that he really possessed it. Naturally, the main character decided to show off his skills with a culinary knife. First of all, the guy took out an apple and threw it into the air. As soon as the apple flew up, the young man waved his sharp dragon chef's knife in the air. The apple fell straight onto the plate. A knife appeared in the boy's hand, which he controlled like a master. From his movements, no one could tell that a few days ago he was an invalid who could not even cut some kind of vegetable. The cook touched the blade of the knife to the middle of the apple, and the fruit was cleaned as if it had been handled by some chef, and not by a novice amateur. Looking at everything that was happening, Mo Hong thought something to herself. Mo Ting has become good at managing his hands. Now the Mo family has its own heir. Grandfather turned to the dragon and Po and invited them to go. He would prepare the family dishes of the Mo family with his own hands. Naturally, the guests agreed to such a proposal from the head of the family. Seeing that everyone was leaving, the main character shouted and asked his grandfather not to forget about him because he also wants to eat his strappy. To which I received an answer from the old man that now he is not the dragon's cook, so he must cut the apple into 4 parts, each of which must be cut into another 3,000 slices. Then cut one portion into cubes the size of a grain of rice. Chop another portion so that each piece is able to pass through the eye of a needle, and cut the third portion into strips. The slices must be the same thickness. If there is even one flaw, the guy will start all over again. In addition, none of the slices should be dented or broken. These are exactly the demands Mo Ting demanded from the workers of their restaurant, and now that his hands are healed, let him fulfill his requests. After these words, the door in which the main character was in the room slammed shut. He was left alone with the apple and the knife. The grandfather's order did not upset the grandson in the least. The guy was even pleased to do what he was told. Mo Ting proudly accepted his grandfather's words. After all, now it was his turn to do this work. Juzi and Po ate everything at once from what the head of the Mo family had prepared. There were only scraps and empty plates on the table. Eating the leftovers, the divine beings talked about how tasty it was. It seemed like they had never eaten such food before. The goddess of food thanked Grandpa Mo and said that his food was excellent. Mo Hong was pleased to hear this from the Celestials. He noticed that he had not felt as good for a long time as after a piece of that cancer from his grandson. The spirit of Teot's house told the old man that his food was really tasty. But she lacks the divine aura since it is much healthier for them to eat the food of immortals. Therefore, he brought with him a crayfish of the purest soul, and it would be great if the chef cooked it. The dragon nurse, seeing the crayfish in the human world, got angry and began to hit Po, asking whether he too steals like Mo Ting. Now she's going to give him such a beating that he won't like it enough. The spirit of the Teot house was sure that the 9th princess would also want to eat the pure soul crayfish prepared by Grandfather Mo. Juzi pretended that maybe just a couple of small pieces could be eaten. The old man laughed and suggested that if they wanted, he would make this dish without any problems. When Grandfather wanted to cut up the crayfish, he didn't succeed. The knife he used split open. Mo Hong said that this ingredient is really strong. The sounds of the main character's laughter were heard in the kitchen. The young man was already near his comrades and told his grandfather that since this is the food of the gods, it cannot be cut with an ordinary knife. For such ingredients, one should only use the dragon's chef's knife, which he was holding in his hand at the time. Old man Mo was surprised what his grandson was doing here because he told him to practice with a knife. But it turns out that this young man disobeyed him and is shirking work. Mo Ting assured his grandfather not to worry, since his task had already been completed. The old man did not believe that it was possible to do this so quickly if the elder of the family had previously made concessions to his heir and allowed him a lot. But if he lies to his grandfather, then this will have a very bad effect on him. The main character understood that the grandfather would not believe until he saw with his own eyes that he had really carried out all his orders. A few seconds later, Mo Hong was looking at his grandson's sliced apple. In front of the old man, there were 4 plates with different types of cut fruit. Grandfather took a sliced apple in his hand to check the correct technique for cutting the fruit. To do this, he dipped the slices into the water. Juzi and Po looked in surprise at how evenly and statically they were cut. The slices are so thin that in the water they looked like transparent, smooth jellyfish. Mo Hong picked up a thinly sliced apple thread to see if it could pass through the eye of a needle. When Grandfather was able to stretch the apple thread, he was speechless with admiration for the subtlety with which it was done. Mo Hong admitted that his grandson's knife skills were perfect. The boy passed the test. The old man could not believe that this was really the work of his grandson, since just a few days ago his hands could not do even the slightest manipulation of cutlery. The main character boasted about his abilities and asked if there was anyone else here who was capable of this, because he could not disappoint his beloved grandfather. And the elder of the Mo family admitted that the young man did a good job chopping the crayfish was not ideal. Now he needed to cut this divine ingredient into threads now. For the dragon cook, this was no problem. No one could give him such experience and training except his beloved grandfather. Mo Hong said that meat itself has a unique taste. It can be cooked well and much easier without the use of spices. He said that, for example, a soup that is cooked in chicken broth cooked over low heat turns out very tasty. Grandfather continued that the pieces of meat should not be too thin. Otherwise, they will not be suitable for such a dish. All the Celestials watched the cooking technique with attention and surprise. Mo Hong added just a little salt because both the soup and the meat had a natural taste and melted in the mouth. This dish could be called crayfish soup of the purest soul. The main character picked up a plate of soup, inhaled the aroma, and carefully examined everything that was there. The dragon's cook was offended that at the slightest movement pieces of meat swirl like clouds. This is simple, but elegant, and a return to the basics. This method of cooking is unique. His grandfather, even at this age, does not give up. Mo Ting and his friends emptied the bowl of soup in a matter of seconds. It was so delicious that it seemed as if it had been prepared in heaven. All 3 were delighted with this wonderful taste and said that they had tasted happiness. Grandfather Mo was happy to receive such praise from divine beings. Mo Hong said that in China there are many ways to cook meat. Deep frying, steaming, stewing, boiling, freezing, baking, and that's not all. Approaching the stove, telling all of the above, Grandfather turned on the kitchen stove. He took the spoon that was lying on the table. Turning to his grandson, he promised that he would teach him everything. As the proverb says, learning is hard, learning is easy in battle. This was exactly what was needed for the main character. The young man dreamed of learning everything his grandfather knew and becoming the best cook in the family. The day passed very quickly and excitingly. The grandfather shared with his grandson that he had never even dreamed that the boy would be able to cook. Now, the main thing for him was that his grandson did the right thing, used all the opportunities. The elder of the family was confident that Mo Ting would become an excellent cook. The main character assured his grandfather not to worry. He would visit him from time to time if possible. On the other hand, the young man still had one more business in the city. He was going to visit the Huang family. We need to return the humiliation that the Mo family experienced. Grandfather was surprised that his grandson was still offended by this. The old man asked the kid to remember how their family cooks. The goal in preparing their kind was to make it perfect and unforgettable for the guests. Mo Hong said that their family is a master who puts his soul into every dish. The main thing for them is honesty and virtue. Lies and deceit will never bring true words. The family has always been friendly to every guest with their over-the-top skills ready to satisfy their hunger. Grandfather continued that in ancient times, when people struggled to survive, especially in times of food shortage, the Mo family found ways to make inedible things edible. Turning something terrible to taste into something wonderful was the main task for their ancestors. This is the pinnacle of culinary art. From those ancient times to the present day, thanks to the efforts of culinary specialists, the number of ingredients available to people has grown from several tens to hundreds of thousands. With the advent of these ingredients, many cooking methods were discovered. Their ancestors made cooking something through which people live and rejoice. After what was said, the grandfather hit his beloved grandson on the head so that he would come to his senses and correctly understand his words. Mo Hong asked the kid to think about whether he wants to become famous as a chef who used his skills for revenge, or whether he actually values cooking. This understanding of his true purpose in life was very important for the dragon cook. The old man asked little Tina to think about what was said. The main character did not immediately understand what grandfather wanted to say by this. When he continued to think about the elder's words, the door was opened with a scream by Juzi, who was looking for him. The goddess said that she and Po had not been here for a long time, and she had heard that there was a lot of delicious food here that he should show them. The cook was furious because his grandfather had just prepared a whole feast for these gluttons. They still hadn't eaten enough. He couldn't even imagine how much he could fit into them. The dragon quickly grabbed the main character by the hand and dragged him into the city to taste different dishes. Juzi also explained that since they are immortal, they can eat 100 times more than ordinary people. Running to the central streets in Yizhou, it was as if they were on a food street. Invitations came from every restaurant and cafe that their dishes were prepared with natural butter, and they lured every passerby with aromas and some other things. In these places, you could also try meat on skewers. Fresh, spicy soups and broths attracted not only their aroma, but also their appearance. Mo Ting ordered a portion for Juzi. He thought it would be enough. After each payment for the food that Po from Juzi ate, the hero experienced a shock. This was due to the payments he made to buy food for these gluttons. Everything that was eaten by the divine beings was not enough for them. They asked for more and more food. The people who surrounded them were shocked that the little girl who looked fragile was eating a lot, and there was also some strange dog with her. Mo Ting asked his friends to stop eating, because the food they swallowed could make them burst. After the meal, the main character tried to quickly leave the street so that Juzi wouldn't drag him somewhere else to taste some dish. Barely keeping up with the guy, the girl asked him not to walk so fast as she would not be able to enjoy the aftertaste of the food. The 9th princess of the dragon family was attracted by invitations to have people line up for an entry number. When the girl looked in the direction from where she heard the invitation, she saw a huge, beautiful restaurant that was opening. Since it was the first day of opening, but all dishes were 50% discounted, this place seemed like a paradise. The dragon asked the main character to go and see what was happening there because there were a lot of people there. Apparently, it was very tasty and interesting. To which I received the answer, let them go themselves, and the guy will go home. Jiuzi ran into Mo Ting and decided to remind him that in fact she healed his hands, so let him now thank her, at least by the fact that they will go to this place. Apparently, this man has no conscience at all towards the goddess. The young man begged her to go another time, just not today. He was struggling with the fact that it had been a hard day and he was very tired. A passerby intervened in their dialogue and recognized the guy as the heir of the Mo family. The stranger told his friends that today the Huan family restaurant will be opening with a banquet for all guests. They would be honored to host the Mo family. Juzi turned to Mo Ting and asked if he knew this guy. Maybe it's his good friend. From the first words, the main character understood who was standing in front of him. He knew that it was his sworn enemy Huang Tian. The heir of the Huang family repeated his words and especially emphasized that it would be a great honor for them to treat the Mo family to their new restaurant. All the hatred for this family, all the humiliation that he had to suffer through his trauma, surfaced in Mo Ting's memory. The opponent continued to bully the main character, saying that he was afraid to come in. The dragon cook replied that naturally, what does courage have to do with it? He simply doesn't want to have anything to do with the Huang family. Tian further continued to hit the sore point, pointing out that since the Mo family remained the leader in cooking for hundreds of years, if everyone there is the same coward as Mo Ting, the main character could not tolerate such humiliation again. Having stopped, the dragon's cook agreed to evaluate the level of the competitor's family's dishes. This is exactly what Huang Tian wanted. He wanted to once again disgrace the heir of the Mo family, and really believed that he would succeed. In the restaurant, which just opened today, the presenter reported and thanked everyone for coming to the Huang family's restaurant. The showwoman said that the creator of the restaurant chain, Mr. Huang, is from Yizhou, although they have branches all over the world. This is the first establishment opened in this city and in our native land. The presenter said that for more than a century, this family has been perfecting Sichuan cuisine. The heavy salt and butter traditionally of Sichuan cuisine no longer corresponds to today's times. That is why they introduced a number of new dishes that incorporated some Western styles of cuisine and were well received by many guests of the establishment. The presenter's hand reached out to the red tablecloth that covered the table. The woman continued that Huang is the only Chinese restaurant with 3 Michelin stars, and they hope that they can bring a new taste to their hometown. Having torn off the red cloth that covered many dishes, the guests were shocked by what they saw. For visitors, it seemed like real culinary art. Huang was praising himself to Mo Ting and his girlfriend that he didn't think the two had eaten any of these dishes before. The competitor was sure that the Mo family living in Yizhou had a limited understanding of the world. Although the Huang family had not been in the city for 100 years, while traveling around the world, Tian created many of his own and special recipes. So they need to try these dishes and see for themselves its perfection. The main character was infuriated by how much this upstart talks. Juzi asked if she could eat already because she could no longer restrain herself from the aesthetic she saw. Our character shouted at her, asking whose side she was on. After all, he is his enemy, and you can't eat this food. The goddess repeated that he was just making fun of him. Was her cook so spineless that he couldn't put it like that and respond to his actions? The speed with which the comrades rushed to the table surprised the dragon cook. The presenter invited everyone to try delicious dishes. One of the guests decided to taste and enjoy the food, but the man did not have time to try anything. The piece that was pinned on the fork was blown away by a strong wind that swept across the entire hall. Not only the man, but all the guests who came to the opening were victims of a strong hurricane. None of those present could understand what had happened and what was happening. Juzi, after sweeping all the food off the table and swallowing it, sat down on a chair. This was not enough for the goddess. She also asked for more, but he helped her eat everything, lay on the plate, and also agreed that he still didn't need enough food for tasting. After these words, panic began in the hall. Everyone was screaming how terrible it was. There were obscene statements directed at them. The fact that this girl scared a lot of people to death, and anyway, she could eat everything to the bone. Looking at everything that was happening, Huang Tian stood pale. From the outside, it seemed that he was already dead. All this guy could think about was that it was the end there, and why did he bring them at all? If only he had known that with the arrival of this couple, the opening would be disrupted, he would never have invited them. Mo Ting quickly grabbed Juzi's hand and pulled it to run away before they were caught. We run screaming, and the main character pulled the girl behind him. They were unable to escape because while the dragon's cook crashed into someone's body, the friends fell to the floor from a collision with a man. The man who stopped Ting was the head of the Huang family. Tian's father thought that the heir of the 7 Mo had come to ruin everything, and therefore disrupted his opening ceremony, and now he just wants to sneak away. Hearing a familiar voice and looking up, the main character realized who was standing in front of him, and the dragon's cook began to say that it was not his fault. Huang Tan himself invited them. Since they organized the banquet themselves, shouldn't anyone eat as much as they want? The head of the Huang family said that it is true that today is their opening, and therefore everyone is naturally invited. But this couple was not among those invited. Our character did not understand what his enemy wanted to say. To attract more attention, the elder Huan decided to introduce everyone to the young man who ruined his restaurant opening. The owner of the restaurant announced that this boy is the heir of the Mo family, and as everyone knows, a while ago, the Huang family and the Mo family fought for this restaurant, and this guy refused the culinary duel, so the Huang family won the restaurant fair and square. He continued that today, the opening ceremony of the restaurant was supposed to take place, and to thank all the guests they prepared this banquet. Naturally, the owner did not expect that the Mo family would take this so badly that they would send 2 angry guests who, like mad pigs, swept away everything in their path just to ruin their banquet. The man called on all the guests to watch and explained this act as a deliberate attempt to ruin the holiday for their family. Everyone in the hall began to talk about how these words made sense and began to believe that the Mo family was truly pitiful. Some people said that the girl looked like she hadn't eaten for several years. It was a shame for them to communicate with such people. The dragon heard all the bad words addressed to her. They even called her that in the past she was a pig and accused her of bringing an ugly dog to such a place. Jiuzi could barely contain her strength. Mo Ting rose from the floor. The main character caught up with the head of the Huang family. The dragon's cook explained that what happened today had nothing to do with their families. His girlfriend didn't want to offend them. It was his request that she eat, so there's nothing to blame her for. The restaurant owner laughed and took the opportunity to once again humiliate the Mo family by saying that they also have equally excellent cooks in their families, and he will not get angry and call the police. In exchange for this, he suggested not to forget this incident since he had a solution that Mo Ting should have gotten used to by now. This decision was for our character to kneel again. The dragon's pupils narrowed when he heard what the cook heard. Out of anger, he already wanted to do something. Jiuzi stopped the young man by placing her hand on his shoulder. The dragon nurse was very angry with the actions of the Huang family and their attitude towards her cook. Seeing the state of the goddess of food, the main character tried to stop his friend, but it was already too late. The 9th princess of the dragon family was too angry. A strong wind formed in the restaurant. The angry goddess could not allow someone to order her heavenly world dragon cook to kneel. The old man said that he had never heard of a dragon cook, and if the miss says that she was also betrayed by this boy, then he should definitely bend the knee to her. The owner of the restaurant saw Po, called him a rare breed of dog, and suggested that it was a talisman for the girl. Mo Ting watched as the spirit was about to explode from hearing the words, and as blue flames came out of Jiuzi. He understood that now this couple would destroy everything here. We need to somehow pacify them and lead them away. Enraged, Po shouted that this old man was looking for his death and now she would find him. When people heard that this creature was talking, there was no limit to their surprise. Many were very scared. They didn't know what it was. They couldn't find an explanation for it. The spirit of Tiote's house released a bright explosion. Mo Ting shouted, asking his friends to calm down. Naturally, the princess did not listen to him. She was angry with the Huang family and the people, the way they called her names and insulted her. So she decided to wipe this place off the face of the earth. All the visitors ran out of the restaurant in panic. People saved themselves as best they could. A few seconds later, all that was left of the beautiful hall was a ruin. One of the slabs fell on the main character. Having crawled out from under the rubble, the cook looked for his girlfriend. Seeing where the wind was coming from, the young man had hope that he could still stop his friends. The spirit of the Tiote house was angry to such an extent that it grew in size. He said that the old man needed the amulet. Po's body occupied almost the entire upper floors of the restaurant. The power with which the goddess destroyed everything around was enormous. Looking at the family, Huang Po offered to cook something tasty from them, since he was not full. For the family of enemies, the spirit of the Teote house has already turned into a huge monster. Po approached the head of the Huan family and looked straight into his eyes, filled with fear. The 9th princess of the dragon family said that these little people are too proud and insignificant. They do not see the true power of the dragon cook. For this, she is obliged to punish them. A huge lightning bolt appeared in the sky and a strong explosion occurred. The goddess's wish was for this family of scoundrels to die. The Huang family begged with all their might. They begged the Lord to have mercy on them. The restaurant owner begged the goddess not to kill them. Mo Ting managed to reach Jiuzi and grabbed her hand. The main character asked her to stop, saying that this was his problem and he had to deal with it himself. But the dragon was not going to tolerate such an attitude either towards her, or towards Po, or towards him. The princess threw her friend away from her. Our hero began to operate with the fact that these are the most ordinary people and they cannot be killed. The goddess ordered him to be silent. Even if he doesn't try to stop her, she won't listen to him. Mo Ting had no choice but to invite her to go home and have a delicious meal. After hearing the words, the deities stopped attacking people. Having calmed down, Jiuzi said that she would eat as much as she wanted. The main character was ready to accept her any conditions and cook whatever she wanted. Finally, the goddess said that it was only thanks to Tin that she would spare them today. Turning to her cook, the princess declared that she was expecting wonderful dishes from him today. Otherwise, he would not get rid of her. The owner of the restaurant tried to be kind to the girl and wished her to be careful on the road. Conversations began among the guests that this girl was some kind of demon or magical creature. Apparently, the Mo family is somehow closely tied to them. Senior Huang had to bow his head in gratitude for keeping them alive in front of the heir of the Mo family. Our character said that today's commotion is over, but as a bonus, the main character decided to prove that he is capable of fighting. The dragon's cook found a cucumber. A sharp knife appeared in his hand. Huang Tian carefully watched the actions of his enemy. After working hard, Mo Ting left a cucumber on the plate for his competitor in a few seconds. Leaving the restaurant, the main character shouted that their families would see each other again in the future. Looking at the cucumber that our character left behind, Huang Tian extended his hand and touched it. With one light touch, the vegetable crumbled into identical thin threads. The enemy realized that in the blink of an eye, this guy created threads blowing in the wind. This was Mo Ting's magnificent work. Only the Mo family had this style. None of his contemporaries could repeat this. After returning home, the dragon's cook prepared a lot of food, which his friends ate all of. He couldn't even imagine how much they could fit in. When old man Mo Hong learned about the incident, he was furious. It was a shame for their family. The grandfather reminded his grandson that he wanted to take revenge professionally. How can Mo Ting now consider himself a cook after what he did? Jiuzi stood up in defense of her friend. She explained that the young man had nothing to do with it. This vile family has no right to blame either her or Po. The spirit of the house confirmed that if our character had not intervened, then these pathetic people would not have gotten off so easily. The old man turned to the immortals with the words that it was this brat who was to blame. They don't have to justify and defend him. Mo Hong understood his grandson's action and dissatisfaction because he holds a strong grudge against the Huang family. Yes, they did the wrong thing, but with such an attitude, this child will not be able to reveal himself as a real specialist. He began to explain the origins of Sichuan cuisine. Since before this concept did not exist at all, generations of chefs have combined the features of various cuisines of the north and south, east and west into one whole, resulting in Sichuan cuisine having about 100 flavors in a single dish. All the masters who studied this humbly adopted the experience of others and did not argue. Without their work, Sichuan cuisine would not exist. The old man asked the children's opinion about how they think cancer could end up in Sichuan dishes if their cooks had not studied with professionals in Shanghai and Cantonese cuisine. Mo Hong agrees that his grandson had serious problems with his hands, but he read all the family cookbooks and learned to cook on his own every day. Grandfather could not believe that his heir had so quickly forgotten the pride and long history of the foundations of the Mo family. After all, starting from the experience of our ancestors is the way of the cook. The head of the clan sternly said that Mo Ting does not deserve to be a chef of Sichuan cuisine if he is not willing to throw away everything else for her. The grandfather continued, "As for the Huang family, the grandson is driven only by resentment and the desire for revenge. He didn't like that his little one didn't even try to assess the level of his rival's cuisine." Mo Hong was disappointed with his child. The protagonist's friends felt guilty that only Mo Ting was reprimanded, but they were considered not guilty. Our character understood that his grandfather was right, because in those days when he could not cook, dreams of a kitchen were all he had. The dragon's cook realized that after his hands were restored, he stopped treating cooking as something sacred. For him, it became a common practical skill. This couldn't continue. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Someone came to visit them. Mo Ting went to open the door. Our character was surprised to see who was standing in front of him. So are the rest of the people in the house. They didn't expect to see Huang Tan here. Po was still angry with this boy, so he directly said that he had come here in vain. Huang Tian was afraid that this beast would become a huge monster again. Therefore, the heir of the Huang family rushed to say that he was not here to quarrel. He was just looking for Mo Ting. Having calmed the spirit, the main character asked why he was looking for him. It was difficult for the blonde to pronounce the reason for his search, but still he found the strength within himself to do it. Kneeling down, the competitor asked to teach him how to also wield a knife, and he was ready to pay any price for it. Mo Ting remembered the words his grandfather said a few minutes ago, that he doesn't deserve to be a Sichuan chef unless he's willing to throw everything else away for it. When Po heard the words of the enemy, he got angry and said that after this little guy insulted them, he also had the impudence to come and forgive something. The main character looked back into the house. Jiuzi and grandfather stood behind him. They were waiting for his answer. The heir of the Mo family said that he himself had relatively recently learned to use a knife. Huang Tian regarded this as a refusal, so he apologized and did not let our character finish. The heir of a feuding family turned around and left. Grandfather and the dragon silently watched what was happening. The main character continued to speak despite the fact that his opponent did not listen to him. The young man said that he believes that this skill belongs not only to him, but to every chef. Our character can teach someone else if he wants. Hearing these words, the princess of the dragon family and grandfather were proud of Mo Ting. Huang Tian stopped. The heir of the Huang family did not immediately understand what Ting had just told him. The amulet hanging around the princess's neck, which contained the signed contract between the goddess of fruit growing and the dragon's cook, glowed brightly. Jiuzi received a message that Baihua would soon bloom in the jade pond so that the dragon cook would use them as ingredients for the dish of the goddess Siwanmu. The 9th princess of the dragon family knew what this message meant. She cried out to Mo Ting that they had an important client and the house of Taote. The goddess immediately created a funnel into their world. The dragon grabbed the cook's hand and pulled him home. The guy didn't understand where she was in such a hurry. The girl didn't explain. She didn't have time for that. Mo Ting shouted to Huang Qian that he would teach him as soon as he figured out what was happening, and don't let him think that he would just forget about his family. The passage to the world of dragons was closed. The friends disappeared on the other side of the crater. Huang Tian said to himself that he would wait for his opponent and, regardless of the cost, learn this technique. Every 100 years, Baiwa blooms in the Jade Pond. The dragon's previous cook prepared a delicacy called a treat of 100 flowers. Sivanmu was very pleased. The Empress liked everything so much that she gave him the precious peach of immortality. This is the best gift in heaven and earth. Jiuzi said that if she tries really hard this time and Sivanmu is also pleased, then the Tayot house will teach a wonderful gift. This gift will be the peach of immortality. This is the one that can make the one who eats it immortal. More precisely, with its help it is quite possible to prolong your life, avoid all diseases and strengthen the body as a whole. And most importantly, this peach is very tasty. Jiuzi also called the main character a fool. Mo Ting did not like this and responded by calling her a fool. During their argument, Po joyfully flew into the door. The spirit of the house flew with such force that it broke the furniture in the room. The goddess had to hit her friend in order to somehow stop him. Jiuzi asked what was wrong with him and why he was so crazy. The spirit rejoiced and said that the divine chicken and that the purest cancer of the soul is in great demand. They earned over 10,000 crystals. It's a fortune. The goddess rejoiced at what she heard. The girl was penniless for a long time and now she has some money. He will never complain about poverty again and buy himself whatever he wants. Mo Ting said that with the help of these crystals they need to renovate Tayote's house. The dragon didn't like it right away. She considered these to be her crystals and they should not have taken them from her. The main character said that she is irresponsible with money because they will earn much more after the update. The princess said that this sounded true and she would be happy to listen to his wishes about the new thing. Our character asked Po, what can they update now? The house has earned 15,798 crystals, which can be spent on upgrading the ballroom to a first-level suite, upgrading 2 separate rooms. These are 10 sets of tables and chairs made of dragonwood to give the interior, hang and fill the room with the atmosphere of a fairy forest. It was also possible to upgrade the garden with 1,000 herbs. Mo Ting liked the fact that the herb garden could be improved. Jiuzi became worried about what was wrong with it and why it needed to be improved. The main character's face was terrifying. He ordered his friends to follow him. If they succeed, they will be able to earn a fortune. Our friends moved to the spice garden. Mo Ting walked through the forest. He was surrounded by spices with eyes and teeth that wanted to bite him. The main character turned to Po. He didn't think there would be enough ingredients here to feed the entire heavenly world. The spirit of the house said that the cook does not even imagine the potential of the house. The garden is the most powerful artifact of the 3 worlds. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared near the friends. Here a knife appeared that was owned by the dragon cook, and he stood up in the form of a dragon and asked Po to repeat what he said. The spirit replied that the knife is also very good at cooking. The sharp knife was proud to say that he and the Tayote building were very powerful. After all, he is 3,000 years old, but still the whole house in Tayota cannot compare with him. The main character said that a knife can only cut, but there is everything in the house. Sharpblade protested because she believed that the guy knew nothing about the power of the artifact and how it related to the abilities of their owners. He doesn't even realize how much a knife enhances his culinary skills. Moreover, the highest aerobatics of cooking is considered a heavenly feast. Having heard the last words, Po hastened to close the dragon's mouth. The young man became interested in what a heavenly feast was. Jiuzi and Po pretended that they knew nothing about this. There's nothing special about it. The goddess told the young man not to pay attention and began to talk about the ingredients. He doesn't have to worry about plants and animals from here that can be used both in the heavenly world and in the world of demons. And there are even enough people for everyone. In order to somehow convince Mo Ting of this, the 9th princess asked him to look at something. The goddess pulled out the root of the plant. The dragon ordered the cook to look down at the place where the root was being dug. The guy saw that the ginseng was growing again. It was real magic. The cook did not believe that this could happen. Mo Ting took the root and broke it into pieces. He saw divine power emanating from the root. This root was ginseng. If they sold it, they would become the richest in the world. Jiuzi was surprised that the cook spoke as if it was something so rare that no one would be able to buy it. It's just that their world is full of more valuable things. If ginseng or something similar were more expensive, she would have become rich long ago. The goddess continued that the preciousness of the ingredients does not matter. They only care about the taste. Mo Ting thought that immortals were also superficial. The main character dug a hole and dropped a grain. Jiuzi asked what Mo Ting was doing now. She didn't understand anything. Our character replied that he was planting seeds. The dragon became interested in what this fellow had come up with again. The young man opened his backpack, which contained many earthly plant seeds. The guy explained that these were the seeds of spices and vegetables that he asked his grandfather to collect from the ground. Although there are many different plants in this garden, there are still no necessary ingredients. Without some of them, it is impossible to prepare a good dish. The young man was confused by one thing. The seeds that he planted for some reason did not grow as quickly as the plants that were in this garden before. The dragon princess said that Ting has the same idea as the previous dragon chefs. In fact, many of the ingredients in the garden are of earthly origin. Some crops have changed many times to adapt to their world. Juzi pointed with her finger where the wheat grows. When the cook saw the dragon, he shouted how huge it was. How could she even grow up like this? To which the goddess replied that this is a garden of 1,000 herbs. He should not be surprised. Juzi pointed to the tomatoes. They were larger than a bear. Also in this garden grew broccoli, which rose almost to the skies. The only thing that surpassed it in growth was the chili pepper. The main character realized that he was right. With this, he can now cook authentic Chinese food at Teote's house. Po flew up to the cook and said that it was not so easy to make earthly plants survive in the heavenly world. The spirit said that the environment of the immortal world is different from the earthly one. It is extremely difficult to succeed in cultivation here, and only a few dozen dragon cooks have succeeded in this over the past 10 million years. If a guy succeeds with crayfish, then he will be lucky here too. The young man was surprised that there was such a small chance for earthly plants to grow in this world. The dragon said that he had better start studying heavenly ingredients, otherwise he won't succeed as a cook. He and Po decided to leave him alone in this place. The dragon's cook was thinking how he would now prepare dishes without ingredients. How can you grow something here? Mo Ting could not know whether the seeds would take root on this land or not. Some cooks have succeeded in this business in the past. Our hero was thinking whether to stay or not. He repeated to himself that he is a cook. Why should he know how to grow vegetables? A dragon flew up to the guy and said that he had fragrant flowers in his bag. But first he says that it seems the old man is inattentive since these are not seeds, but flowers. And our character said that it was osmanthus and grandfather planted a whole tree of it in his yard. The main character remembered what he remembers about osmanthus. Mo Ting quickly grabbed the dragon, who was shouting to let him go and stop doing something to him. The young man ordered him to turn into a knife. The guy came up with something that could work. The feast continued in Teote's new house. Juzi and Po ate until they dropped. The goddess asked if the cook was still there in the garden, and replied that yes, he was still there because she knew how stubborn he was. The girl said that she should study and asked again when the jade pond blooms. Po replied that he would flourish for 3 or 4 days, but he did not know whether Mo Ting was ready. Suddenly, Mo Ting flew into the room. The boy shouted with joy that he succeeded. In appearance, Mo Ting seemed crazy. The dragon knife spoke out in defense of the owner, that Po himself is crazy and his whole family is the same. A sharp knife pointed at Mo Ting and said that this child is a genius. He couldn't believe it, but he really did it. Our character fell from joy and from exhaustion. The owners of the Teote house could not understand what was happening, and their eyes widened in surprise. The cook immediately asked his friends to appreciate his work. Entering the garden of 1,000 plants, they saw a huge tree. Motina managed to grow a snow orchid. It gives a wonderful smell to food and can be stored either fresh or frozen. Po was very surprised when he saw the tree from the other side. There are also yellow flowers. No one has heard of a tree on which 2 different flowers grow at once. A very strong and pleasant aroma emanated from the flowers. Jiuzi asked if Mo Ting really did this, to which our hero replied that naturally it was his doing. The girl brought a flower to her nose. The smell is very familiar, but she has never seen such flowers. Mo Ting believed that everyone was very interested in how he achieved this. Juzi quickly hit the boy and said, since he wants to show off so much, then let him tell. The main character voiced the reason why he was not satisfied with the garden. It was the inability to cook a good dish, not to use many different spices. The 1,000 herb garden looks impressive, but to be honest, the grass here is monotonous. The development of human cooking has always been accompanied by the discovery of new ingredients and spices. Peppercorns, hot peppers, fresh oil, Tabangian sauce, aged delicious wine, spices for aroma. This is an important part of the dish. Without this diversity, there is no point in even trying to do something. There are too few herbs in the world of deities, and since our character has chosen a dragon as a cook, he must therefore prepare only the most delicious dishes. The 9th princess of the House of Dragons did not understand how a flower would help with this. The young man said that since his friends said that the plants of the mortal world are not compatible with the world of immortals, therefore they cannot be grown here so easily. Even on the ground, plants did not always take root. The definitions soil and water are needed, but there is one way. Juzi was wondering what method this was. Now the time has come to show off, to which the dragon's chef's knife said that it was he who worked here. Mo Ting immediately grabbed the knife. The dragon in the hands of the cook turned into a tool. Tin decided to talk about this method that he used. The guy said that this method is called grafting, and the knife was angry that Mo Ting took all the attention. Hearing the word grafting to Jiuzi, she thought that he was vaccinating the tree. Grafting is a method of artificial propagation of a plant by cuttings. That is, cutting off a branch or bud of one plant and attaching it to a branch of another plant. Two plants connected together grow into one, which allows the new plant to quickly adapt to the new environment and bear fruit. And the heavenly earth greatly improves the quality of the plant. The main character said that in any case, he did not expect it to work. But he still tried it, and did not regret it. He wondered if his friends knew what kind of flower it was. The goddess said that the shape tastes like osmanthus. Yes, and the smell is the same, but still it's not it, and the color and design look like a snow orchid. Our character said that everything is correct. This is an osmanthus with signs of a snow orchid. This means that earthly plants can not only take root in the heavenly kingdom, but also have new qualities. Mo Ting threw his hand over the shoulder of the goddess. The main character continued that if they complete Siwanmu's assignments, then she can give them that peach, and they will plant it here. Juzi screamed that he was crazy. The peach of immortality is the embodiment of vitality. They had already said that no one dared to plant a tree outside the Jade Pond. The peach never bears fruit, so let it save its life. Still, the young man was haunted by the thought that if a peach is grafted onto a fruit-bearing tree, then the fruits of the plant will be just like the peach of immortality. The owners of the Toyota house were speechless at such a proposal. The guy continued that the melon pear, the fruits of the campsus, the immortal peach, the ears of wheat, and even the root of the heavenly Norichnik. They are all located in the same garden, but differ from the original. Perhaps the effect is worse, but they can win in quantity, and will even be able to sell them. It all seemed like a crazy plan, but still Juzi liked him and she quickly began to hug him. The girl said that this way their restaurant would become the richest place. Mo Ting was a genius. The main character noticed that earlier the goddess said that no one dared to plant a tree before, and they might have problems. The goddess said that this was nonsense, and she could pay to work in Tayot's house as bodyguards. And if they call her a glutton and want to kick her out, she will crush everyone with her crystals. Juzi continued that only the three of them would know about this plan, and if the information leaked further, she would beat everyone to death. Now Mo Ting's main task was to prepare an excellent dish. The goddess threatened that he had no right to make a mistake. Hearing these words, it seemed that Juzi had left the picture. Her shadow stood in the heavenly illumination. The girl asked the dragon cook to try very hard. Friends returned to Toyota's house. Po became very passionate about studying agriculture. Mo Ting asked to do this. He had to learn several new dishes, so the spirit would have to take up gardening. To do this, the main character went to his world and found some books there so that he could learn everything. The number of books that our character brought from his world could not be named. There was almost half a library. For some time, Mo Ting diligently crossed different plants of the human and heavenly worlds. Now it's time to taste them. The main character put a small piece of an incomprehensible vegetable on his tongue. The taste made capillaries appear in his eyes. Apparently it was very acute. The young man quickly grabbed a glass of water and drank it. Indeed, it was very spicy. But this was exactly the result that the dragon's cook was trying to achieve. He managed to grow real Sichuan pepper. My father said that it tastes great, just like home, only 1,000 times spicier. Now that the chef has tasted all the inoculations, this is a perfectly done job. Juzi said that the spirit of the house was great. Everything worked out for him. Po was pleased to hear this. He thanked his friends for their support, and only thanks to them, he was able to achieve such success, and will now continue in the same spirit. Mo Ting said that grafting the next 100 species should be an easy task for him. Po began to shout to the dragon's cook that this was his gratitude. Hundreds of species are already too much. He can't even imagine how difficult it is to grow it all. The spirit spent a lot of time in the space of Taya. He read an untold number of books over 30 years, hundreds of books, botany, gardening, soil science, and other sciences. For this reason, he even entered the biology department of Moscow State University, and this is very difficult. No one knows how. The spirit of the house even showed the contract of Lomonosov of Moscow State University. Appeal to applicant Po that he is enrolled in the biology department of their university, and you just need to call for the number and inform him of his decision. Po cried to Juzi to tell the cook that hundreds of species are a lot. Apparently, he wants to kill the spirit of the house. But the goddess supported the dragon cook and said that he must do everything that the cook tells him. Otherwise, they will begin to study a new pain program with him. Po continued to cry that he no longer sees anything because of such reading. Even if she kills him, he is no longer afraid of anything. The main character told Po that he is just smart and his work is very important for the Toyota house. With his achievements now, they will definitely surpass the entire generation of dragon cooks. This is what he promises him. Our character continued that he planned to give part of their income to the spirit of the house to pay for his huge contribution. Well, if he doesn't want to work, then let him stay that way. The ninth princess of the dragon family immediately understood why this was said and supported Mo Ting, saying that she thinks about the immortal world. There are plenty of creatures who will want to do this work, and even for an excellent pay. The spirit of Tyote asked how much he could get in a year. The young man almost began to reason that judging by the sales of heavenly chicken and crayfish of the purest soul with new spices, he would not have problems developing new dishes. In this case, it will be easy to increase sales by 1,000 times, with Jiuzi of course getting the largest share, Mo Ting the second, and Po the third. According to the calculations of the main character, this was at least 100,000 crystals per year. The owners of the house widened their eyes when they heard the number. The boy thought that this was not enough for them. But since this was just the beginning, in the future they will expand the restaurant chain and hold corporate events, weddings, and funerals. They will need a lot of space, and that's not all. There are a lot of interesting things in the plans. The number they heard greatly satisfied Jiuzi and Po. They literally shouted brutally that they needed to start. In addition, the girl threw herself into Mo Ting's arms with the words, "Is this true?" He will not be able to deceive her about this. The main character was frightened by this. He thought that the calculations might not be so accurate and asked to be released. But this didn't help at all. The girl held the chef tightly in her hands. Po said that he would do what Mo Ting told him. The spirit even swore that he would not leave the space of Tai until he had cultivated every plant he spoke about. He cannot worry about leaving it to him and having achieved the rank of master or professor if necessary. He wants to plant 1,000 herbs in the garden with plants of the mortal world, as well as the world of immortals, the world of ghosts, and the world of demons. He began to dream that he would become a master of the three worlds, a master of gardening. A huge luminous pillar appeared from the sky. A letter flew out of him. Jiuzi realized that this was a message from Siwanmu. The jade pond was in bloom. The dragon cook master of the Tyote house was invited to prepare a Baihua feast. Friends headed to the jade pond. Mo Ting thought that the peach of immortality would soon belong to him. The jade pond was very different from the area where Tyote's house was. His landscapes were incredible even in comparison with the space of Thaya. Mo Ting looked around all the time and could not see enough. Jiuzi asked him to stop looking. She needed to go faster. Finally, they arrived at their destination. Before them was indescribable beauty. Trees were blooming everywhere and the bridge was almost in the sky. In front was a building with a pink lotus growing from it. When our heroes approached the gates of the jade pond, it was necessary to report to the goddess Sivanmu that the dragon's cook had arrived. Mo Ting admitted that when he first came to Tyoto's house, he thought that there was no more wonderful place in this world. But it exceeded all his expectations. Hearing such words, Jiuzi could not stand it, and again gave the main character a slap. How did he even think of comparing the Jade Pond and Tyote's house? Empress Siwanmu is the wife of the Jade Emperor. Naturally, all their possessions will be many times more beautiful. Po stood up for Mo Ting and said that who would speak if the goddess of fertility herself had been wandering around the human world for centuries. The dragon, taking her breath away, asked him to repeat what he had just said. But he never answered, only asked to let him go. Mo Ting looked at the showdown of his friends. He was only wondering where the peach tree was. The girl said what was he thinking about? Such trees will not grow at every step. The peach garden is a small but maximum protected space without the permission of the Empress. Even immortals do not have the right to enter there. Our character, in his defense, said that there was nothing wrong with this because he thought that the monkey had already managed to steal a couple of peaches. The guy talked about the monkey in the Chinese myth, which is described in the novel Journey to the West. Sun Wukong, the king of the monkeys, hired himself into the service of the Jade Emperor, who assigned him to guard the peach garden of the goddess Siwanmu. On the eve of the feast that the goddess arranged for other deities and immortals, Sun Wukong ate all the peaches in the garden, then tricked himself into the heavenly palace and drank the elixir of immortality prepared for the celestials. Jiuzi said that she didn't know anything about this legend, so she just asked what the guy wanted to say when talking about the theft of the monkey. Mo Ting began to tell that in the human world there is a legend that describes how Sun Wukong caused a stir in the Siwanmu garden. Having heard this, the goddess of fertility immediately closed the cook's mouth and ordered him not to pronounce this name even by accident. If anyone heard it, he would be killed on the spot. She also added that this guy is good, has an excellent voice and hearing, amazing eyesight, courage worthy of heaven and earth. He even was in Tyote's house. But it was in this place that whoever remembers the past is out of sight. The main character realized that this was not a legend, but that everything really happened. The girl asked him not to ask any more questions, or she would beat him up. There were two signs on the mountain. One road led to China, and the other somewhere into the unknown. Little monkeys carried a peach to their master in the cave for lunch. An unknown creature took and tasted the fruit. The taste did not suit the gentleman, and the peach flew straight into the little monkeys who brought it. An angry man shouted that this was not it. For 1,000 years he has been trying with fruit alone, and for this it turns out that he tried so hard, the result was simply terrible. After his atrocities, Sun Wukong was taken to the Heavenly Palace, where he tried to break free, but was captured and thrown to the ground and crushed by Mount Wuxingshan. Moreover, this act was performed by none other than the Buddha himself. The monkey said that he missed the cuisine of the human world and asked to bring 2 mortal cooks here so that they could cook for him. The monkey elder said that taking mortals into the immortal world of crime, the cooks are not able to handle their ingredients. Earth food in large quantities can take a lot of energy despite the incredible taste. The Monkey King was disappointed that this could not be done. He ate fruit all his life, but now he has become immortal and still continues to eat it. The elder hastened to reassure him and said that the other day he heard good news. An old man who looked like a monkey said that he learned about the opening of Taiot's house. This was very good for the man who was sitting in the cave, since he had not been there since the last discovery. They heard rumors that things were going very well in this house. Sun Wukong said that this is great news. When he was there last time it was not so tasty, but definitely better than these terrible fruits. He must get there. To begin with, the Monkey King decided to find out where the owners of the Taiot house were. The man quickly jumped out of the cave. Monkey said that they had not been at their post for so long. He was wondering where they were now. The elder asked the gentleman to be careful since he had not gone out for a long time. With his gaze, Sun Wukong saw that the people he was interested in were in the Jade Pond. The monkey was also interested in why the dragon's new cook seemed like a boy. Well, the man quickly switched gears and remembered that he had not eaten immortality peaches for many years. The old man suggested that the gentleman place an order for home delivery. The main characters approached the entrance to the Jade Pond. There they were met by the gate guards. Mo Ting was glad that they finally got up. Such a long road was difficult and unusual for him. Jiuzi introduced herself to the guards that they were representatives of the Taote house and were invited to hold a banquet in the Jade Pond for the Empress. The lady saw them from her dome in which she was located. The main character asked what was happening and why the atmosphere was so heavy. They weren't even greeted. The goddess asked him to shut up. The Jade Empress addressed the guests. She wanted to clarify whether this boy was the new dragon cook. Jiuzi confirmed that he does exist. His name is Mo Ting. The owner of the pond asked how old this young man was. The main character answered that he was the 9th princess of the dragon family, hurried to help her friend, and said that he was young and very talented. She was sure that the abilities he possessed would impress their majesty. But the Empress thought differently. He seemed too young for her and she ordered them to return home. Our heroes were surprised by this turn of events. The Jade Empress recognized that there are geniuses in the world, but perfecting any skill takes time. Since a woman hosts such a banquet very rarely, its ingredient blooms only once in a century. Unfortunately, she was not sure that the guy could handle it. The lady was afraid that he would waste these treasures in vain. Jiuzi bowed before Lady Siwanmu and said that this is the dragon cook, whom the sharpest knife himself approved. He will not disappoint her. The mistress of the Jade Pond said that nymphs take care of the Baiwa, and although they were not able to taste the fruits of their labors for a long time, they did not stop trying. If guests do not respect this treasure, it will be very sad for them. The lady turned to Jiuzi and said that she might seem cruel, but she could not trust this dragon cook. Sivanmu asked them to return and not force her to repeat it twice. The dragon wanted to object, but Mo Ting stopped her. The main character said that the Empress voiced her decision, and there was no point in arguing. Leaving the Jade Palace, Jiuzi asked the cook if he was thinking of any way to make Lady Siwanma change her mind about her decision. The young man said that her opinion is a complete relic of the past. She simply cannot perceive the new generation normally, so there is no point in humiliating herself against them. Jiuzi wanted to lure Mo Ting with peaches and tried to remind him of this. Our character said that they still won't do anything to her, not in this life, but someday he will force her to change her decision. The time will come when the Empress herself will beg him to prepare food for her. The goddess was angry. She shouted that dreaming is not harmful, and what could this boy do to the Empress? The young man shared that since they had already left the territory of the Jade Pond, she should not care what they would do here. The goddess realized that her friend was up to something. A young man asked to move the kitchen here from the old Taiot house. There was no need to ask the spirit for a long time. He quickly dissolved to fulfill the request. A few minutes later, the old kitchen was already before their eyes. The 9th princess of the dragon family did not understand what was happening. She was indignant that this idiot alone decided to open a stall in such a wilderness. No one would buy anything from him. But the young man was not worried about this, so he asked him to think about what a mortal girl likes to eat most of all. Jiuzi thought about what she was asked. She didn't even know what to answer. The main character meant snacks. The dragon realized that he was right, and she also really liked these things while she was on Earth. These are seeds, chocolate, puddings, chicken feet, candies, toffees, drinks, and much more. When she remembered this, Jiuzi's mouth watered. Mo Ting continued that girls can refuse the main course, but not the appetizer. In addition, the gods tried tasteless food for several decades. The young man set himself the goal of making the Empress understand the power of cooking, which had accumulated over thousands of years. The boy wanted to prove that she would not deprive her servants of delicious food, and our hero deserves the title of Dragon Cook. Juzi understood that he was really very hurt by the Empress's words that he was young. The dragon's cook set to work. The aroma that emanated from the snacks spread throughout the local area. One of the nymphs brought a snack to the imperial palace. The child's behavior did not arouse suspicion among the elders. One of the elders ordered the girl to stand. The baby immediately stopped and pretended that everything was fine. She did not understand why she was stopped. The women who approached her ordered to show her what she was hiding. The girl didn't want to show it, but she had no choice. The child hid a package from Teodo's house. The little girl said that these are just snacks. They have nothing illegal. An unusual aroma emanated from the package. These snacks angered the nymphs. One began to threaten the girl that she somehow dared to do this. They are created from trees and flowers, and should not be stained with traces of evil and greed. Her snacks smell funny and give off an unclean odor. The little girl hastened to explain that she bought this dragon cook recognized by the three worlds. He can't be evil. Everything here is clean and hygienic. The child continued that for as long as she has been serving there, day after day she regularly does her job. The elders did not understand what it was leading to. The girl continued that she could not count how much effort was spent. The child said that every day is work. Her duties include taking care of the flower garden, which brings her pain and injury. For many years, the girl considered herself not happy. The little girl continued that today, when she tried these snacks, she was very happy that normal food finally appeared. It was real happiness. The girl also rushed to say that Dr. Chin exchanged the wind lily for snacks. The nymph asked if she was sure that it was a windy lily since it is a treasure that blooms once every 500 years and asked what the baby gave in return. The child said that she exchanged Empress Siwanmu's most precious treasure, the golden essence of the sun. The elder nymphs were furious at what they heard. It was the strongest fire attribute of the three worlds. The girl hastened to say that this exchange was equal to 3 bags of snacks. This system seemed somehow unfair. The Empress must find out about this as soon as possible. The stall that the main character placed near the Jade Pond was in great demand. There were many nymphs who were forgiven to keep the line. The dragon's cook cooked so that no one was in a hurry as everyone would get it. 3 friends worked hard. The princess did the issuance. The cook and Po cooked. Beautiful girls asked the guy to serve them as quickly as possible. All these women seemed insatiable. They had very little of everything. It was bad from so many requests. He really didn't have time to cook. Juzi didn't like this situation either. She started hitting the ladle, which attracted everyone's attention to her. The princess stated that he had been told that everything was true, but if that's all the nymphs can do, it's very boring. Next time they need to hurry up. Mo Ting asked the goddess to stop, since they would become regular customers. She needed to be more polite. The dragon saw that one of the girls grabbed Mo Ting's hand. The friend became furious and screamed for the nymph to let the cook go. The goddess managed to send everyone who wanted to buy extra snacks, and the dragon's cook invited them to come again and take care of themselves. Mo Ting did not understand why the dragon lost her temper. After all, the business was thriving and everything was going well. Po noticed that the princess was angry this time for a reason. She had a good reason for it. The main character thought that she was most angry because she had not eaten much today. This idea was wrong. Juzi attacked him with her fists and began hitting the cook and Po. Sun Wukong watched their fight from a tree. The monkey man said he liked this dragon cook. He seemed cool. He continued that this guy is going to beat the soul out of the Jade Pond. He doesn't look like he's been there for many years, but his knowledge surprises this man. At that moment, the pig was eating snacks from the bag and interrupted the monkey's thoughts with its slurping and grunting. The pig was pleased with this food. It was really tasty for him. Sun Wukong called the pink one so that someone could express his assumptions, but he kept eating and eating. The monkey man took the piglet and asked if he really thought that the most sensible woman in the 3 worlds would deal with this trifle. The pig realized that the Monkey King wanted to help this boy. Smiling slyly, the man confirmed that he wanted to help him. The pig was not surprised, but he was wondering if his friend was also afraid of trouble. Sun Wukong understood that the only thing in which this world is not ideal is culinary talent, and this boy controls nymphs well. With his help, he will become even better. The pig asked if the man was sure that the cook would treat them. His thoughts immediately rushed to the cooked food, how tasty and appetizing it could be. The pig believed that he really needed help. Otherwise, it turned out somehow like a pig. Tired of cooking and fighting, the friends lay on the lawn and discussed how crazy it was that these women were insatiable. Juzi didn't like what Mo Ting said about women, but the guy quickly reacted and said that he didn't say anything. The guy switched to the fact that in the human world, girls also like to eat, but here it somehow manifests itself on a large scale. Jiuzi agreed. It was for this reason that the mortal world suited her better. The goddess asked how much they earned today. Looking into the box where the treasures lay, Po realized that they were doing badly. It was very terrible. The friends did not understand what the spirit was talking about. An enraged Po flew up to Mo Ting and accused him. They simply sold snacks from the garden of Tyote's house, and they were paid in very valuable things. Jiuzi did not understand what her comrade was talking about, since they did not force them to do this. The spirit of the house opened the chest and asked them to look inside. About half of the Jade Pond's treasure lay there, and he also saw some nymphs selling their clothes. This is outright robbery. The spirit wanted to say that although the Empress is very prudent and careful, if their property, acquired by backbreaking labor over tens of thousands of years, were confiscated in one day, then they would wonder what they would have done in her place. The goddess realized that this was really scary, and it was better to urgently close the shop and need to run away. Only the friends did not have time to go anywhere. A bright beam shone in the sky. A huge pillar appeared in front, inside of which shadows could be seen. These were the Empress's envoys. It turned out that Sivanmu invited 3 representatives of the Tyote house to visit the Jade Pond, and this had to be done right now. The main character thought this was good news. The young man believed that the Empress would reward them. Only the dragon and the spirit understood that they were being summoned most of all for a different reason. They all immediately went to the Empress's palace. One of the nymphs made a report. The report believed that 3 representatives of the House of Tyote had arrived on orders. In the hall where the guests were shown off, all the nymphs were gathered. The girls whispered why they were all invited. One admitted that the queen looked very angry. Someone in the hall heard that a public execution of the dragon's cook was about to take place. The friends realized that today they might get a lot of punishment for what they did. Seeing the cook, everyone began to look around and wonder what would happen. Mo Ting also thought, and did not know what this woman really wanted. Apparently, she liked to watch everyone waiting for her. Within a few minutes, the Jade Empress appeared and ordered everyone to sit down. The guests were given chairs on which they sat. The Empress asked whether these young people understood that they had committed a crime. The heroes did not understand why this was a crime. The Empress continued that the 3 of them deceived and stole almost all the treasures of the Jade Pond. Jiuzi remembered their conversation before coming to the Jade Pond, where the main character said that if they appeared before the Empress, then the goddess and Po would need to talk. So, they need to prepare for the fact that she might be mad. The cook seemed wise to the spirit of the house, and he even began to admire him. The princess asked the boy how long he had managed to deceive the girls that he knew them so well. The young man thought that she was 1,000 years old, but she still didn't understand anything. Mo Ting explained that the internet is now full of all sorts of different forums with discussions about whether he just reads them regularly. But the most important thing was the piece of paper that the main character showed to his comrades when he took it out of his backpack. Jiuzi understood that they needed to do as Mo Ting told them. The Empress considered that this trio had nothing to oppose, but the goddess said that it was all a lie. People began to accuse that how dare she openly condemn the Empress. No one could believe that the nymphs of the Jade Pond were so stupid that they could be so easily deceived. After all, these were valuable relics. The Empress said that since she had never framed anyone, today she wants to hear their point of view and evidence of innocence. The dragon said that Tyote's house was built by the Jade Emperor and the Immortals to make up for the lack of cooking in the immortal world. And this is the absolute truth. The Empress claimed that everyone knew about this, but she did not understand what the goddess of fertility wanted to say. Jiuzi continued that after creating the house, everyone in the immortal world could finally enjoy delicious food, but now their house is suffering. Having finished her words, the princess kicked the spirit of the house as it was his turn to speak. Po turned on all his acting skills and began to cry about how unhappy they were. The spirit told His Majesty a truth that she did not know, that the Tyote house was in no way financed from the outside. Only they put their whole soul and savings into it. No one else can provide home repairs, purchase of groceries, care for all the gods, utilities, rent, and so on. Po told how he had to endure all kinds of abuse, kicked and beaten when the gods did not receive their portion. The spirit asked Her Majesty to judge for herself how difficult it was for him all this time.